Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. It wouldn't be a fatal wound to me. Wood's words left the entire audience at a loss for words. Not only did he possess such a ridiculous amount of mana, but he also had absurd regenerative abilities. He was no different from a certain overpowered cheat character. Since you've made me this excited, I'll share something else with you. My magic affinity extends to all elements, and my blessing makes me even stronger when night falls. The sun should be setting soon. Listening to Wood nonchalantly divulge his own information, Julius could only smile bitterly. He had no reason to think Wood was lying. The moment Wood unleashed his mana, Julius knew his chances of victory were slim. Physically, Wood had the upper hand. In terms of swordsmanship, Wood could unleash sword energy with the power of magic. Julius had hoped to tip the balance using magic enhanced by the spirits, but it was Wood's sheer mana reserves that crushed any hope of victory. To be honest, you are the second person I've ever met who made me feel utterly hopeless, Julius admitted. Still, I want to test my limits, so allow me to show you my strongest move. Having realized that further struggle was futile, Julius accepted Wood's advice and resolved to use his most powerful technique to end the battle. Around him, the magic elements began to stir, and 6 differently colored lights emerged from the air, gradually merging into Julius's long sword. The influx of various elements caused his sword to shimmer brilliantly. Though it was still a sword, it now looked more like a rainbow. Kororista. Rainbow sword. With a swift leap forward, Julius closed the distance between himself and Wood in an instant. His long sword shone brilliantly as he swung it, and a radiant arc of rainbow light burst forth. The rainbow sword was a technique that combined Julius's swordsmanship with magic, his original magic sword technique. The slash infused with 6 types of magic not only possessed immense power but could even cut through any magic. Originally, Julius had intended to keep this move in reserve. A trump card to use when he challenged Reinhard one day. However, now, faced with yet another overpowered opponent, he was forced to use it. A magic sword technique, huh? And judging by the effects, it looks quite powerful. But, speaking of magic sword techniques, I happen to have a bit of expertise as well, Wood said, eyes gleaming with battle spirit as he watched the resplendent rainbow slash. As he spoke, cracks began to form on his sword as he channeled an immense amount of mana into it. A layer of frost spread from his arm down the blade, and the temperature in the area began to plummet. Hyaki Yagio style, Ice Attribute 1 Sword Technique. Yukiana. As Wood swung his sword, a wave of frigid air erupted from it, creating jagged iced spikes across the ground. At that moment, Julius saw what seemed like a beautiful woman pass him by, and the next thing he knew, his entire right side lost all sensation. The audience, watching from the sidelines, rose to their feet, witnessing the snowflakes that gently fell across the battlefield. Most of them hadn't even registered what had just happened. A massive wall of ice stood in the center of the battlefield, dividing it in 2. The finest knight, vice captain of the Royal Guard and its second strongest member, was now frozen. Half his body, along with his sword, encased in the ice wall. That last strike from Wood shattered Julius's magic sword technique in an instant, though it seems like he held back at the very end. Reinhard observed, explaining the scene before him. Many people might not have understood what had happened, but Reinhard, the sword saint, could clearly see every detail of the preceding events. I lost this match. Welcome to the Royal Guard, Julius declared, accepting his defeat without any complaints. He knew that had Wood not held back at the very end, he would likely be dead. The difference in their abilities was simply too vast. In fact, it wouldn't even be right to say they were on the same level. The last time Julius had felt so powerless was when he faced Reinhard. And now, yet another monster had appeared among their ranks. Hearing Julius concede, Wood reached out, and the ice wall towering over the battlefield melted away instantly. Julius's surrender signified that Wood had passed the test and earned the right to join the Royal Guard. No. The moment Wood demonstrated his abilities, Marcos had already changed his mind. There was no way he would let someone like Wood leave. The royal guard's strength was directly tied to the prosperity of the Dragon Kingdom. Previously, Marcos had dismissed Wood, thinking of him as nothing more than a lowly thug. But after seeing him fight Julius and hearing Reinhard's words, Marcos knew he had been wrong. Priscilla, who had been watching the entire battle, now looked at Wood with an even more intense gaze. She finally understood why her instincts had been so strong when she first saw him. Chapter 353, Wood's True Identity. Both his swordsmanship and magic had reached top-tier levels, to the point where even the kingdom's finest knight was defeated so easily. With such abilities, even if she wasn't chosen as the new queen of the Dragon Kingdom during the royal selection, Priscilla believed that, with Wood's help, she could still achieve her revenge. The strongest force of the Empire of Wallachia was Cecilus Sigmund, but Priscilla had met him. When it came to sheer power, Cecilus might be able to defeat Julius, but it would never be as effortlessly as Wood managed. Powerhouses like Wood and Reinhard were already beyond what most would consider conventional limits. Meanwhile, after Wood defeated Julius and successfully joined the royal guard as a unit captain, Amelia and her party had also arrived in the royal capital. Since Roswell's territory was on the fringes of the kingdom, Amelia's group ended up being the last of the candidates to arrive. Aside from Roswell, who had gone ahead, Amelia was accompanied by Ram, and Subaru Natsuki. Barasu, you better prove useful this time. If you can't help Lady Amelia during the royal selection, you can expect to do twice as much housework when we get back. Ram remarked sharply. Due to limited funds for the trip, Ram had replaced Subaru in the role of house sitter. However, as soon as Subaru heard about the royal selection, he immediately recognized that a significant event had been triggered. After all, he was a transmigrator. While his combat skills were nothing special, he was certain that the protagonist was the key to pushing the story forward. With an opportunity like this, to prove his worth while also impressing Amelia, there was no way Subaru would let it pass. So, after a great deal of pleading and with Amelia speaking on his behalf, Subaru managed to join the group headed to the royal capital. Don't worry, Ram. I still don't understand what this royal selection entails, but when it comes to brain power, I have complete confidence in myself. Besides, we have you, Ram, Puck, and Roswell on our side for any physical confrontations. Subaru said confidently, unfazed by Ram's cutting remarks. Subaru's self-assurance wasn't without basis. Aside from having played countless RPGs, which gave him a good grasp of the tropes and story beats, Subaru also had a cheat ability. If anything irreversible happened or a grave mistake was made, he could always rely on return by death to try again. Sister, we should find a place to settle down soon, and then look for Sir Wood. Rem suggested. According to what he said before, he should have arrived in the royal capital ahead of us and become a knight by now. Rem added. Due to the Beast of the Forest incident caused by Melee, which was foiled by Wood, Rem didn't share much of a bond or any affection for Subaru in this timeline. As such, she was more concerned about finding Wood within the capital to ask him to help heal her sister's injuries. Finding someone in the vast royal capital is no easy feat. Since he said he'd join the royal guard, we need only follow Lady Amelia to participate in the royal selection. We'll meet him then, Ram. Ram said logically. In truth, Ram had little expectation that Wood could help restore her broken horn. After all, neither Beatrice, with her vast magical knowledge, nor Roswell, as powerful as he was, had been able to do anything for her. It was hard for Ram to believe there was anyone out there capable of helping her. However, seeing her adorable sister so hopeful, Ram couldn't refuse, so she decided to take a chance and follow Amelia to the capital. Upon hearing that Wood was also in the capital, Subaru, who had been full of ambition, visibly deflated, like a flower wilting in the frost. The person who had left the biggest psychological scar on Subaru was, without a doubt, the dark-haired woman called the Bowel Hunter. The image of her pulling out his intestines was burned into Subaru's memory, leaving him with a lingering fear. But besides her, the second person who made Subaru uneasy was Wood, the blonde youth that Rem and Ram often spoke about. Wood was not only incredibly handsome but also absurdly powerful. Furthermore, like Subaru, he was also a transmigrator. The difference was that Wood wasn't some naive newcomer. He'd grown up in this world, embraced its customs, and seemed to have left behind any sense of normalcy that a modern person might have. He was impulsive, always ready for a fight. Although they were both transmigrators, Subaru's cheat, return by death, had no effect on Wood, who seemed to have an innate distaste for being reset. Wood had even once warned Subaru that if he kept playing around with return by death, he'd make sure Subaru ended up as nothing more than a vegetable or cripple. Such harsh threats made Subaru anxious at the thought of encountering Wood. And with Wood's charm and overwhelming power, Subaru couldn't help but feel overshadowed every time they were together. Calm down, Subaru. This is the royal capital of the Dragon Kingdom. There shouldn't be any life-threatening situations here, Subaru said to himself, trying to steady his nerves. Besides, the royal selection isn't solely about strength. Strategy, intelligence, and political acumen are sure to be tested as well. If it comes down to that, even against Wood, I, Subaru Natsuki, won't necessarily lose. Subaru continued to give himself pep talks, working to overcome his fear of Wood, while following Amelia to a nearby inn in the capital. Shortly after Amelia and her group arrived at the inn, an official from Lunica came to inform them about the start of the royal selection. The selection had originally been scheduled for the near future, but because all 5 dragon priestesses were already in the capital, the Dragonstone had shown an unprecedented reaction. Fearing the consequences of waiting, the kingdom's council of sages decided to advance the selection ceremony. Amelia, having just arrived in the capital, still didn't fully grasp the details of the selection. Now, learning that they were expected at the palace the next day, she was left bewildered. As Amelia tried to politely ask the official about the specifics of the ceremony, she quickly realized he had no intention of answering her questions. He simply delivered the council's message and turned to leave. As he left, Subaru and the others overheard him muttering, "I can't believe even an evil half-elf can be a candidate for the throne." Amelia, catching the hint of sarcasm, pulled her hood lower, trying to hide her ears. Both Rem and Subaru had initially wanted to stop the official and give him a piece of their mind, but Amelia held them back. Since being awakened from her frozen state, this wasn't the first time Amelia had encountered such treatment. Though she didn't fully understand why, she knew her appearance. A half-elf. Reminded the people of the Witch of Envy, Satella, who had brought catastrophe to the kingdom 400 years ago. Moreover, Amelia's resemblance to Satella was uncanny, they looked almost identical. For this reason, Amelia desired to participate in the royal selection. She wanted to prove that she was not Satella. That she wasn't the witch who brought disaster. Instead, she wanted to bring happiness to the people of the kingdom. Amelia's arrival, along with the Dragonstone's response, prompted the selection to begin sooner than expected. Though Amelia and her group knew little about the selection's procedures, they had no choice but to follow through now that it was happening. Meanwhile, Wood had finally managed to get rid of the clingy Priscilla. As a new captain of the Royal Guard, he intended to open some channels and allow Elsa's faction to infiltrate the capital. After writing several letters detailing plans for the assassination group and handing them over to Mealy, a knight soon entered to inform Wood that he was required at the palace the following day for guard duty. It had only been a day since he'd started his new job, and now he had to pull overtime. Wood grumbled about it, but once Marcos handed him 2 months' worth of salary in advance, his complaints quickly vanished. If you want a horse to run, you need to feed it. If you want it to sprint, you better feed it well. Wood fully agreed with this sentiment. Unlike a certain miserly goat-bearded old man who had always made him work overtime without a dime of compensation, Marcos was clearly more perceptive, not only advancing his pay but doing so at a captain's rate. Wood now felt it wasn't such a bad idea to stand guard for a day. The royal selection ceremony for Lunica was about to commence, and the identities of the 5 dragon priestesses gradually came to light. The 5 candidates were as follows. First was Amelia, a half-elf who bore a striking resemblance to the Witch of Envy, Satella. Then there was Felt, the granddaughter of the late king's brother, who had been kidnapped and was later discovered by the current sword saint in the slums. Next, there was Priscilla, who inherited the Volokchan family and was known as the Crimson Bride. Kruss, the head of the Karsten ducal house, was another candidate. At just 17 years old, she had inherited her family title and was already recognized as a highly talented leader. The last candidate was Anastasia Hoshin, who possessed remarkable business acumen and was the eldest among the 5 dragon priestesses, being originally from a merchant guild. The citizens of the kingdom were naturally curious about who would become Lunica's next monarch. After all, the new ruler would directly impact their lives. In fact, some gambling establishments had even started taking bets on which of the 5 dragon priestesses would become the next ruler. Among the 5 candidates, Kruss Karsten was considered the favorite, with the lowest betting odds. As the head of a ducal house, she had the support of many nobles and was viewed as the most likely to succeed. The one with the highest betting odds, meaning the least favored to win, was Amelia. Despite being one of the dragon priestesses, the majority of both the nobility and common folk disapproved of Amelia due to her resemblance to the Witch of Envy. The selection ceremony was held in the palace's grand hall, attended by the kingdom's ministers and the council of sages. As members of the royal guard, Wood and his squad were assigned to maintain order during the event. Today is a big day. The royal selection is about to happen. Many have been preparing since yesterday. What's with that sleepy look of yours? Reinhard asked Wood with an exasperated smile as he saw Wood yawning beside him. Wood, Reinhard, Felix, and Julius had been assigned to the front row as captains of their respective squads, and Wood's lack of enthusiasm was not helping their image. Come on, I just started this job yesterday, okay? Besides, the royal selection has nothing to do with me. Who becomes the new ruler has nothing to do with me. Wood replied, brushing it off casually. He had stayed up late writing detailed proposals for expanding Elsa's assassination group and sent them to her via Melee. The royal selection wasn't exactly high on his list of priorities. However, as the dragon priestesses walked into the grand hall one by one, Wood's indifferent expression suddenly changed to one of shock. He knew 4 of the 5 candidates. Amelia was a given. Wood had already pegged her as the main heroine of this world. It wasn't surprising that she had the title of Dragon Priestess. What he hadn't expected was that the alluring widow he'd flirted with and the young girl he'd befriended in the slums were also dragon priestesses and contenders for the throne. Of the 2 remaining candidates, the one with short green hair and a confident demeanor, dressed in male attire, was Cross Karsten, whom Wood didn't know. The other, however, he did know. It was Anastasia Hoshin, a striking girl with soft lilac hair, wearing a white dress and a white woolen hat. In fact, unlike the previous 2 simulated lives, Wood was not a transmigrator from the Zero world or reborn individual from the Mushoku Tensei world. When Wood awoke in this world, the character he was simulating had already lived through some experiences. Due to the accumulation of memories, Wood hadn't had time to sift through them after arriving in this world. Only recently, during a period of leisure, had he managed to absorb all these memories. Wood's full name in this world was actually Wood Hoshin. Chapter 354, I, Wood Hoshin, am willing to become her knight. Anastasia Hoshin and Wood Hoshin. Just hearing these 2 names was enough to make the connection. That's right, Anastasia Hoshin was Wood's sister, although not by blood. Anastasia came from the lowest class of Karagi, essentially the slums, and that was where she first met Wood. When they were young, both Anastasia and Wood grew up in the slums, suffering hardship after hardship. Anastasia, due to a congenital defect, was unable to use magic and was nearly sold into slavery. It was then, when they were both still children, that Wood rescued her from a nobleman, wielding his sword to free her. After that, the 2 began wandering together. During their travels, Anastasia displayed extraordinary business acumen, which led her to gradually make a name for herself. Upon returning to Karagi, Anastasia bought out the Luzica Trading Company and renamed it. In honor of the legendary hero Hoshin of the Wasteland, whom she admired, she adopted his name for both the company and herself. Having experienced a life of deprivation, Anastasia had developed an insatiable greed, wanting to seize everything for herself. To her, there were only 3 things that mattered: wealth, power, and her brother. The first 2 stemmed from her inherent greed, while the last came from their shared childhood struggles. Anastasia saw her brother as the most precious thing in the world. Her possessiveness toward Wood was intense, seeing him as her exclusive treasure. She loved him dearly, yet her desire to protect him bordered on obsessive. When Wood grew older, he became increasingly resentful of Anastasia's excessive protectiveness and her greed. So, one day, he quietly left the city-state of Karagi. Now, Anastasia had become the president of the largest trading company in Karagi, yet her ambitions didn't end there. She wanted to lead the largest trading company in the world. For that reason, she sought to compete for the throne of the Kingdom of Lunuka. A merchant's career had its limits. To expand her business and achieve greater power, it was essential to gain a certain status. Unlike Anastasia's aspirations, Wood had always dreamed, even as a child, of becoming an honorable knight and protecting the weak. This was why his body bore the blessing known as Knight's Honor. It also explained why, when he first met Amelia and her companions, Wood could easily pull out large gold coins, the highest denomination, from his pocket. As the young master of Karagi's largest trading company, carrying a few gold coins was completely natural. Seeing an unexpected figure among the candidates made Wood uneasy. He began to subtly move behind Reinhardt and the others, hoping to avoid being noticed by a certain someone. The 5 dragon priestesses had arrived, and the next part of the ceremony involved each of them stepping forward to make a speech, to see if the Dragonstone would acknowledge them. The first to step up was Cross Karsten, who was the candidate with the most support and highest approval. The Karsten family had always been a prominent noble house of Lunuka, serving the royal family loyally for generations, and Cross herself was highly capable. Yet, to everyone's surprise, after the standard introduction, Cross went on to challenge Lunuka's relationship with the dragon, declaring that if she ascended the throne, she intended to sever ties with the dragon. Even more surprising was that the Dragonstone acknowledged her as a dragon priestess. Despite such a radical statement, after Cross received the Dragonstone's recognition, Marcos, maintaining order, loudly announced, "Next, will the knight sworn to loyalty please step forward?" Each dragon priestess was expected to have a knight sworn to them. If no knight would swear loyalty, it indicated a lack of worthiness as a candidate. Cross's knight was Felix, and the two shared a strong bond, having grown up together. Following Cross was the petite Felt. The nobles had initially intended to support Cross, the most popular candidate, but her radical remarks had shocked them. After all, they were part of the Dragon Kingdom. And now someone was suggesting severing ties with the dragon. It was outrageous. If they had to shift their support, Felt seemed like a natural choice, given that she had a direct connection to the royal bloodline as the daughter of the late king's younger brother. However, just as the nobles were beginning to shift their support to Felt, hoping she would be more conventional, her declaration left them seething. She boldly proclaimed that, if crowned, she would rid the kingdom of corrupt nobles. The Dragonstone acknowledged her as well, and many nobles glared at the young girl in fury. Some even shouted angrily at Reinhard. Is this how the Astri family instructs those of royal blood left in the outside world? No, I have serious doubts that this brat from the slums is even of royal descent. She might just be a fraud. How many nobles were truly innocent? Felt's vow, and the Dragonstone's recognition of her, made them fear that her reign would spell the end for the nobility. Do you question the Astri family values, or my own judgment as Reinhard van Astri? Felt is unquestionably of royal blood, and the Dragonstone recognizing her is proof enough. I, Reinhard van Astri, will adhere to my family creed and become Lady Felt's sworn knight. Anyone seeking to harm her must first step over my corpse. Reinhard stepped forward and knelt before Felt, swearing his loyalty. With the strongest sword saint pledging himself to her, no one among the gathered nobles dared say another word. Reinhard was simply unbeatable. No one in the kingdom could match his strength. Reinhard, remember that the Astri family is also a noble lineage. You are, by definition, one of us. One of the nobles argued, hoping to remind Reinhard that his family was also part of the nobility and would be subject to scrutiny. Reinhard responded with a hearty laugh. Lady Felt's will is my will. If the Astri family is found guilty of corruption, then naturally, we too must be judged. The Astri family had never been numerous, and they were devoted to the path of the sword, uninterested in anything else. Reinhard had no fear of an investigation. And even if there were issues within the Astri family, his rigorous and honest character meant he would not hesitate to see justice done. The strongest contenders, Cross of the Karsten ducal house and Felt of royal descent, had both disappointed the nobles. Now, they could only hope that the remaining dragon priestesses were more reasonable. But the remaining candidates proved just as eccentric. Priscilla, also known as the Crimson Bride, had a reputation that preceded her. When she stepped up, she was arrogant, proclaiming that the throne was hers by default, for the entire world revolved around her. Next came Anastasia. The gathered nobles, truth be told, did not think much of her. To them, she was nothing more than a commoner from the slums, crass and unworthy of being Lanika's new ruler. Anastasia's knight was Julius, a skilled knight with a sharp mind for governance. Unlike most of the nobles, Julius recognized the economic difficulties facing the Dragon Kingdom due to corruption and the lack of a monarch. A kingdom's prosperity hinged on its economy, and Julius believed Anastasia's talents could revive Lanika's struggling economy. Once Julius stepped forward to swear loyalty to Anastasia, all those standing in front of Wood were gone, leaving him fully exposed to the crowd. Wood. I can't believe you're here. Julius and Anastasia's relationship was more of a partnership than that of a knight and his lady. Anastasia's interest in the throne was primarily to help her expand her business. She had little emotional attachment to Julius's oath of loyalty. However, when she spotted Wood in the Grand Hall, Anastasia couldn't stay put. She immediately descended from the platform, ran over, and threw her arms around Wood, oblivious to all else. Anna, I told you already, stop hugging me like this. I'm not a child anymore. Wood sighed. He'd called her Anna since they were young. Though he seemed exasperated, his expression was helpless as Anastasia clung to him tightly. To Anastasia, Wood was like her most valuable treasure. And her desire to protect him was borderline obsessive, one of the reasons why Wood had run away from the Hoshent raiding company. Wood's addressing Anastasia so casually shocked everyone in the room, especially Julius, who was momentarily at a loss for words after pledging loyalty to Anastasia. He certainly hadn't expected Wood to be Anastasia's brother. But, as expected of the finest knight, Julius quickly recovered, wearing his usual elegant smile. If Wood was Anastasia's brother, that could only be a good thing for their camp. Given Wood's immense strength, Julius believed that if there was anyone in the kingdom who could match Reinhard, it would be Wood. Having Wood's support would significantly increase Anastasia's chances of winning the royal selection, and that meant Julius's own goals could be achieved sooner. After this commotion, the selection ceremony resumed, and the final dragon priestess, Amelia, stepped forward nervously to share her ideals. However, due to her half-elf lineage, Amelia's speech was met with boos and jeers. The young girl, standing on stage, endured the verbal abuse with trembling shoulders, tears welling in her eyes. Natsuki Subaru, seeing this, tried to step forward, only to be dismissed for not being a knight. When he persisted, Julius even took it upon himself to put Subaru in his place. Seeing the young girl on stage, trembling but refusing to cry, and hearing the noble's insults and jeers, Wood silently sighed. He slowly stepped forward from the formation. "I am Wood Hoshin, and I am willing to serve as Lady Amelia's knight, to assist her in her bid for the throne." Wood's calm voice echoed throughout the hall, leaving the previously noisy nobles stunned. Puck, standing by Amelia, and Subaru, who was pinned to the ground, smiled. Amelia, still on stage, widened her eyes in disbelief as she looked at Wood. Priscilla hid her face behind her folding fan, her smile full of intrigue. Anastasia, meanwhile, glared at Amelia, her young face filled with jealousy and resentment. This is absurd. Even if there are knights willing to disgrace themselves by swearing loyalty to a half-elf, allowing her to compete for the throne is utterly preposterous. Someone finally shouted, breaking the stunned silence, questioning Amelia's right to participate. Chapter 355, Amelia, the enemy of an overprotective sister. If I'm not mistaken, the royal selection is decided by the Dragonstone, isn't it? Honestly, it sounds ridiculous to leave the fate of the kingdom to a mere rock. But regardless, the choice of the dragon priestesses is something that you nobles and ministers have no right to interfere with, do you? Half-elves are evil? That notion is fundamentally flawed and idiotic. If you examine the continent's history, countless villains have arisen from among humans. Far more than just the Witch of Envy, Satella. If you, as a human, share the blood of past criminals, does that make you guilty by association? Wood's words left the nobles speechless. But in a room full of scheming individuals, it didn't take long for someone to retort. If this half-elf truly has no connection to Satella, then why does she look so much like her? So, just because someone looks similar, it must mean they're connected? What if this was Satella's very plan? Perhaps she wanted to disguise a savior as an agent of destruction, so that some foolish people might bring ruin upon themselves. Wood's speech didn't contain a single crude word, but it was evident whom he was targeting. Those who feared Amelia were indeed the foolish ones he spoke of. Humphrey, those are just your biased assumptions. Who's to say any of it is true? Wood knew his arguments wouldn't sway the stubborn nobles. Even if Satella did have such intentions, the nobles' prideful nature would never let them admit it. Why prove anything? According to the Dragon Kingdom's law, Amelia has been recognized by the Dragonstone. That makes her a legitimate candidate, and that's all there is to it. As for your concerns about her being related to the Witch of Envy, Satella, it only shows that you're all just cowards, scarred by past defeats. The three heroes defeated Satella in the past, so if she comes back, we simply need to defeat her again. Only those clinging to the past fear a once strong enemy. True visionaries think about surpassing the past. No wonder the Dragon Kingdom of Lunica has grown weak under your rule. It's hardly surprising, given that it's governed by cowards like you. Wood's high-spirited speech stirred many in the audience. But it was also clear that the nobles he called cowards were enraged. If not for the presence of the royal guard, knights trained in combat, they might have lunged at Wood right then. This knight named Wood, is he new to the royal guard? I must say, his words resonate well with me. Cross remarked, her gaze full of appreciation. As a noble raised to be a knight, Cross found herself agreeing with Wood's sentiments. If Lunica truly wished to grow stronger, relying on others, even dragons, wouldn't suffice. More enemies like the Witch of Envy were sure to come in the future. Stagnation, driven by fear of the past, would do nothing to strengthen the kingdom. Cross had grand ambitions. She wanted not only to restore Lunica's former glory but also to lead it to surpass its past. And so, despite the nobles' protests, Amelia's position as a candidate for the throne remained intact. According to Lunica's traditions, since Amelia had been acknowledged by the Dragonstone and had a knight sworn to serve her, she had every right to vie for the throne. But now, there was a problem. There were 5 dragon priestesses this time, and since the Dragonstone had recognized all 5, who should inherit the throne? The Council of Sages conferred with the Dragonstone for some time, ultimately reaching a conclusion. The decision was that each of the candidates would be given a period of time to contribute to Lunica. Whoever made the most significant contribution would become the kingdom's new ruler. How the elderly council members communicated with the ever-glowing stone was anyone's guess, but since the Council of Sages was an authority even the royal family had to heed, there were no objections. The selection ceremony had ended, and now the true competition had begun. Sir Wood, thank you so much for your help. Without you, I really wouldn't have known what to do back there. As they left the palace, Amelia bowed deeply to Wood, expressing her gratitude. She was genuinely moved by Wood's support and by what he had said in the Grand Hall. As a half-elf who resembled Satella, Amelia had always felt insecure. But after hearing Wood's words, she decided to embrace her identity. Wood was right. Satella was Satella, and she was herself. No matter the connection between them, all she needed to do was be true to herself and prove her worth. This isn't the place to talk. I've rented a mansion in the capital. Let's head there. I'll also have Ram and Rem prepare a feast to celebrate Lady Amelia finding such a strong and reliable knight. The man who spoke from behind was pale, with long blue hair and makeup reminiscent of a clown. He was none other than Roswell L. Mathers, the Margrave and one of Amelia's supporters. Wood was well aware of Roswell's identity. The royal court magician of Lanuka, bearing the red, green, and yellow titles, signifying mastery in multiple elemental magics. It was rare to achieve even one such title, and Roswell had 3. This alone spoke volumes about his prowess. But no matter how powerful Roswell was, he and Wood had no direct connection, so Wood hadn't bothered to investigate him further. What truly drew Wood's attention to Roswell was something he had discovered in the aftermath of killing the mother. In her journals, Wood found out that the one who had hired Elsa to attack Amelia was Roswell himself. Strange, wasn't it? Roswell was supposed to support Amelia, yet he had hired Elsa to stop her. Being both Amelia's supporter and her saboteur seemed contradictory. Despite keeping Amelia at his mansion, Roswell hadn't harmed her. Instead, he had engaged in a series of baffling actions. Did Roswell change his mind midway, or did he have some other plan? Wood didn't know. One thing, however, was clear. Roswell was no simple character. He was cunning, likely on par with human god from the Mushoku Tensei world. If possible, Wood would prefer not to cross paths with him. Regarding the knightly duty, I'm afraid I must apologize. I spoke out earlier because we were acquainted, and I wanted to help. For now, I'm not inclined to formally join any faction, so I may not be able to fulfill the knight role. However, as an apology, if there's something within my ability to help with, don't hesitate to ask. If it's something I can manage, I'll assist. Hearing this, Amelia's face fell visibly, but she quickly forced a smile, showing her understanding. Though she hadn't met Wood often, he had helped her more than once. On the other hand, she had never done anything for him, so she knew she couldn't ask for more from him. The fact that Wood agreed to help if she needed it was enough for Amelia. After explaining himself, Wood was ready to return to the knight's quarters. However, upon seeing a determined figure approaching, he quickly changed his demeanor and spoke to Amelia again. Amelia, actually, I think being your knight wouldn't be so bad. But there's one condition: you must provide food and shelter and help me deal with some personal troubles. Amelia was baffled by Wood's sudden change of heart. Food, lodging, and solving personal problems. What kind of conditions were those? Subaru, who stood nearby, nearly bit through his molars upon hearing Wood's demands. Food, lodging, and solving private issues. In Subaru's modern otaku mind, this translated into dining together, sharing a bed, and attending to private needs. Damn it, Amelia was his angel, and now Wood was going to defile her. Then again, wasn't a knight's duty to guard a princess closely? Why was Subaru's cheat so worthless that he couldn't become the half-elf knight himself? While Subaru indulged in his frustrated fantasies, Amelia and the others finally realized what Wood meant by personal trouble. The rules of the selection had been set, and Cross and Priscilla had already returned to their respective factions to make arrangements. But someone had waited outside the palace for Amelia's group. That person was Anastasia Hoshin, the head of the Hoshin Raiding Company. More accurately, Anastasia had been waiting for Wood. Since Wood had snuck away from the company and wandered for 2 years, Anastasia hadn't seen her brother during that time. Missing her brother dearly but also worrying for his safety, Anastasia now wanted nothing more than to take him back to Karagi. In Anastasia's eyes, Wood's dream of becoming a knight was naive. Being a knight might seem glamorous, but it was far from a safe profession. They were no longer the siblings struggling in the slums. The Hoshin Trading Company was now the largest in Karagi, and Anastasia had a strong demi-human mercenary force. There was no need for Wood to take on such dangerous work. And even if Wood insisted on becoming a knight, Anastasia wanted him to be hers, just like when they were young. Anastasia couldn't bear for Wood to be away from her, much less see him as someone else's knight. Wood, stop being foolish, or else you make your sister angry. I'll even promise not to force you into managing the business or demand that you stay by my side every day. Anastasia thought Wood was just in his rebellious phase. A bit of distance was something she could tolerate. However, the rebellious phase was also when a young man was most easily deceived, especially by a certain half-elf. Anastasia, I've grown up. I don't need that much care anymore. I can live on my own. I've decided to be Amelia's knight, and I'll do my duty, helping her ascend the throne. Even if you are my sister, because we're in opposing factions now, that makes you one of my rivals. So be prepared. Upon hearing Wood's resolve, the seemingly innocent Anastasia exuded an oppressive aura, and she began muttering as if in a trance. Wood sees me as a rival. He used to be such an adorable child. After a brief moment of this dazed behavior, Anastasia returned to normal and looked at Wood seriously. I understand your decision. As Amelia and the others breathed a sigh of relief, expecting a touching reconciliation between the siblings, Anastasia turned her anger and resentment toward Amelia. So, you're the one who stole my rebellious little brother. Originally, I planned to target Crus, the strongest faction, but now I've changed my mind. I'll crush Amelia's camp first. Only then will my foolish brother realize that his sister's side is the safest place to be. Chapter 356, A Midnight Visit from the Twin Sisters. What's up with your sister? She's terrifying. Natsuki Subaru still felt a lingering fear when recalling the challenge Anastasia had issued to Amelia's faction before departing. Having a beautiful sister might be the envy of others, but with someone like Anastasia, her personality was anything but enviable. Earlier, at the palace gates, when Anastasia had thrown down her gauntlet, the seemingly timid Amelia had surprised everyone by stepping forward herself. With a determined expression, she accepted Anastasia's challenge and said firmly, "Wood is my knight, and I won't let anyone take him away from me. Just as Wood protected me in the hall, I will do my utmost to protect him this time. If you wish to be our enemy, then bring it on. No matter what you try, we will face it all." Hearing Amelia's declaration, Puck had a sense of pride akin to that of a father watching his daughter grow up. Anastasia, on the other hand, was visibly furious, her face reddened with anger. Since she couldn't make a move at the palace, she left in a huff, taking Julius with her. As for Wood, he let out a long sigh before choosing to follow Amelia back to their rented mansion. There wasn't much of a choice. The timid half-elf had stood up for him so fiercely that if he decided to simply walk away now, he'd be no better than a scoundrel. Besides, if he went back to the knight's quarters, his sister Anastasia would probably come there to pester him anyway, so Wood ultimately chose to join Amelia's faction. Rem, maybe we should just give up. Even if he agrees to help, there's no guarantee his abilities can restore Mayana Horn. Ram whispered as the night deepened, their voices the only sound in the rented mansion shared by Amelia's faction. Two girls with shoulder-length hair, who looked identical, were quietly sneaking up to a certain room. Upon closer inspection, the two looked the same, but there were distinct features that differentiated them. For instance, their hair. One had blue hair and the other pink. Then there were their figures. One was rather flat-chested, while the other was more well-endowed. But we have to try, don't we? Don't you want to regain your Ana power, sister? Rem showed an uncharacteristically firm attitude toward her elder sister. To Rem, regardless of whether Wood's magic could help Ram, they wouldn't know unless they tried. There was nothing to lose. Excuse us, is Wood here? Ram, unable to argue against Rem's insistence, finally knocked lightly on Wood's door. Come in, the door is not locked. Wood called from inside. He had been pondering how to use his role as the leader of an assassination group to help Amelia secure the throne, and in turn, have Amelia, as queen, support his organization to grow even stronger. Just as he felt he had some promising ideas, he sensed two presences approaching, which disrupted his train of thought. What brings you here this late? I know twins are every man's dream, but if you're here to share my bed, come back when you're a little older. Wood said half-jokingly when the blue and pink-haired twins entered, dressed in silk pajamas. Upon hearing this, Ram stepped in front of Rem protectively, glaring at Wood with a threat in her eyes. If you dare lay a hand on Rem, I'll kill you. Ram didn't know much about Wood personally, and what she did know had come from Amelia and Rem. According to them, Wood was strong and had helped them on multiple occasions. By all accounts, a good person. But Rem's instincts were sharp. The moment she saw Wood, she felt that he was far from a typical knight. She wasn't sure if Wood adhered to the 7 virtues of a knight, but one thing was clear. He didn't come across as an entirely righteous person. Amelia and Rem's favorable impression of him likely stemmed from their naivety. Neither of them had a fraction of the worldly experience that Wood had. With all due respect, given your current strength, I doubt you'd be able to kill me. Wood responded calmly. Besides, I'm not like that pervert, Natsuki Subaru. If I were truly interested, you wouldn't be able to resist me, whether or not you regained your lost power. Wood's meaning was simple. He wasn't interested in the twins that way, and his earlier comment had just been a joke. If he had any ill intentions, the Ana twins would have no chance of stopping him. If you could really help my sister regain her strength, I'd do anything. Rem said sincerely, taking Wood's joke to heart. For Rem, her sister Ram was everything. She had always seen herself as merely a substitute for her excellent sister. To restore Ram as the strongest Ana, Rem believed any price was worth paying. Rem's heartfelt words moved Ram deeply and further darkened her view of Wood, making her even more wary of him. All right, I surrender. It seems one of you takes things far too seriously, while the other is far too naive. Clearly not the types for joking around. If I let you continue like this, I'll be branded a Lilicon. Blue-haired girl, if I recall correctly, your name is Rem, right? Wood continued. I remember promising that if we met again in the capital, I would do my best to help treat your sister. Since it's a promise, I have no choice. You don't need to pay any additional price for it. Rem's face lit up with gratitude at Wood's words, while Rem, though still wary, found her impression of him slightly improved. While I promise to help, I can't guarantee success. I'll do my best, but is that alright with you? Wood asked. Wood knew little about Rem's condition, but he could sense that her body was like a sieve, unable to absorb mana from the atmosphere on its own. While mana flowed through her, it clearly wasn't her own, but Roswell's. Even if it doesn't work, that's alright. Please, just give it a try. Rem urged. Ever since witnessing Wood's ability to heal Mealy's broken leg, Rem had faith in his magical skills. In this world, magic attributes were limited to wind, water, fire, and earth, with the additional attributes of yin and yang as rarer elements. Ice magic was also a subcategory of fire magic here, as fire magic was more accurately described as temperature manipulation. Water magic was often more about support and healing rather than offense. Yet Rem had clearly seen Wood's abilities when he healed Mealy. They weren't water magic but something else. Rem wasn't sure if Wood's magic was some rare attribute or if it came from a blessing, but she knew it was much more potent than water magic. What should I do? Rem asked, her initial skepticism giving way to a glimmer of hope as she decided to give it a shot. Though she had came to terms with her lost power, if she could regain it, she would be better able to protect Rem and assist Roswell. There's nothing special you need to do. Just tell me where your injury is, and even if you stand still, it should be fine. Wood said. Rem, unsure how long the process might take, hesitated for a moment before sitting on Wood's bed, while Rem stood by nervously with her hands clasped. Advanced healing magic, healing wind. In the still room, a green magic circle appeared before Wood, and a gentle wind, glowing with green light, began to blow from the magic circle. Surrounded by the soft wind, Rem felt a sense of lightness as all her fatigue dissipated, and she finally sensed the mana in the air again. The place where her broken horn had once been had the most mana gathered around it. As the green glow intensified, a spectral horn began to form on Rem's forehead, making Rem visibly emotional. The mana within Rem was still growing, but after a brief moment, the green magic circle shattered before Wood. Almost immediately, the phantom horn on Rem's forehead began to fade, and the mana that had been gathering around her started to rapidly drain away like water from a leaky bucket. As I thought, regaining my power is nearly impossible. Rem said with surprising calmness, as if she had expected this outcome. There was no denying that Wood's abilities were unique. Under his healing magic, Rem had briefly managed to sense and absorb mana again. But that state depended entirely on Wood's continuous casting of the magic circle. As soon as he stopped, she reverted to her powerless state. Why? Why did it end like this? Rem clearly saw sister's Una powers beginning to return. Wood, can we try again, just one more time? Rem pleaded, more affected by the failure than Rem, unwilling to give up. Rem, didn't we agree before? No tears, even if it failed. At least we're still together, aren't we? Rem comforted her sister, despite being the one who had lost her power. Though she had lost most of her strength, being able to stand beside Rem was enough for Rem. To Rem, her sister meant everything. The idea that Rem had become like this because of her was something Rem could never forgive herself for. She would never be able to find peace unless Rem regained her power. I don't know what happened to you both in the past, but you seem to have placed quite a heavy burden on yourself. Wood said, seeing the sisters before him. Family is meant to be the ones who always accept you, and just being able to stand together is a great blessing. Don't ever let your family shed tears because of you, understood? I can understand your sister's feelings, I think. For her, you're far more important than any power. So, you are who you are, and there's no need to be anyone's replacement. That's what those who care about you most want to see. Looking at Rem, Wood was reminded of Rudy, Zenith, Norn, and Aisha from his time in the Mushoku Tensei world. Every simulated life Wood had experienced was real to him, and so he understood the feeling of wanting to give everything for family. Compared to the fate of Wood Greyrat, who had died to stop Dragon God Orsted, Rem were indeed fortunate. Though Rem had lost much of her power, she was at least still alive and able to stand beside her sister. Hearing Wood's heartfelt words, Rem were visibly stunned. Rem, especially, found her opinion of Wood improving significantly. People with shared experiences often understood each other deeply, and Rem could tell that Wood had gone through something similar. He must have been in her shoes before. Willing to give everything for his family. Still, I can understand how burdensome it is for the family members being protected. Wood continued after a moment of contemplation, perhaps recalling the pressure Rudy must have felt in Mushoku Tensei. Very well, since I've decided to help, I'll go all in. Seeing as you two have been through something similar to me, I'll help you cast off that emotional burden. But the magic didn't work before, did it? No matter how many times we try, the result will be the same. Ram said hesitantly. It's not that it didn't work. It's just that the effect wasn't obvious enough. If advanced magic isn't enough, then we'll use Emperor level or Divine level magic, Wood declared. Chapter 357, Choosing the Selfless Mage. Ram didn't fully understand what Emperor level or Divine level meant, but she could understand the general idea behind Wood's words. In other words, Wood hadn't yet exerted his full power, meaning that her sister Ram still had a chance of regaining her inner powers. Among the magic that Wood had mastered, healing magic was one of the most advanced. However, in the world of ReZero, healing magic was also the most difficult form of magic, as even Roswell, who possessed an overwhelming amount of mana, couldn't master it easily. Generally, those who could use healing magic were either people with rare affinities or had received specialized training. Wood, who possessed both exceptional talent and affinity, was able to learn healing magic, and he had reached the level known as Saint Tier. At the Saint Tier level, healing magic could repair old injuries and remove scars, much like how Wood had healed burns he had received from an attack by a Mabeast in the past. Ram's broken horn could be considered an old injury, and theoretically, Saint Tier level healing magic should have been sufficient to heal it. However, due to the fact that Ram's on a horn was of a higher level existence and far more complex than simply healing a burn, Saint Tier level magic could only have a partial effect and was unable to fully restore it. Stronger than the healing magic you just used? I suppose that wouldn't be a power that comes without a price, right? Ram, feeling her strength partially returning during Wood's earlier treatment, could already tell that he had been doing everything in his power when using the magic. If he had an even greater magic at his disposal, it would surely come at a significant cost. Possibly through some secret art or dangerous ritual. Regardless of what it was undoubtedly valuable, and with what they currently had, they wouldn't be able to pay for it. Hearing Ram's words, Ram also turned to look at Wood. In reality, they had no strong connection to him and certainly had no right to demand that he help them at such a great cost. However, Ram, from her personal desire, wished that Wood could help her sister. Caught between conflicting emotions, Ram eventually spoke to Wood, saying, "If Sir Wood could really help my sister regain her powers, I would follow you for the rest of my life, even if it means becoming your servant." Although Ram and Ram were maids in Roswell's mansion, their true allegiance to Roswell wasn't absolute. Ram had chosen to follow Roswell because he saved them after the destruction of their Ono village. Ram, on the other hand, simply followed her sister Ram wherever she went. "You have a good sense," Wood said with a slight smile. "To fully restore your broken Ono horn, the power I need to use would indeed require a significant price. Perhaps even a bit of my lifespan. This power is basically my final trump card, so if I do use it, I'd like you to keep it a secret from others. As for following me, there's no need. I'm helping because I want you to be freed from your sister's burden, not to make myself a replacement." As Wood spoke, a gentle silver light began to emanate from his chest. The ancient runes of the Heart of God began to shine through his shirt, becoming visible to Ram and Ram. Though they could not read the runes, they could sense the immense magic power radiating from them. The moment the mystical silver runes appeared, Ram and Ram could feel Wood's magic power grow dramatically. The entire room was enclosed in a barrier that Wood had set up beforehand, but the sudden surge of magical energy caused everything in the small space, paper, chairs, and more, to start floating. Emperor-level healing magic, Holy Mother's Embrace. The ferocious magic filling the room abruptly calmed down, concentrating into a holy woman clad in white robes and holding a staff. The aura she exuded was pure and holy, so much so that it made both Ram and Ram feel incredibly small and insignificant. However, the holy woman didn't recoil from their Ono heritage. Instead, like a kind mother, she gently reached out her hand to touch Ram's head. To be more precise, her hand touched the area where Ram's horn used to be. Massive amounts of mana formed a vortex, concentrating at an incredible speed within the Holy Mother's hand. Ram felt her Ono blood surging through her veins as the tiny broken horn on her head began to grow again, at a visible rate. The process took several minutes, and when it ended, the Holy Mother smiled gently and vanished into thin air. Ram was enveloped by an enormous burst of mana. Uncontrolled wind blades surged out from her, instantly wrecking Wood's room. Tables, chairs, even the bed were shredded into pieces. When everything finally settled down, Ram's face was filled with emotion as she tightly hugged her sister. Ram, still catching up to everything, touched the newly restored horn, feeling the abundant mana coursing through her body, a look of disbelief on her face. "Thankfully, the Emperor-level healing magic was able to restore your horn. If even that hadn't worked, I wouldn't have had any other way to help. Even using the life-draining Heart of God, Wood could only cast Emperor-level healing magic. Divine-level healing magic, however, was still far beyond his reach. Healing magic was fundamentally different from other types, and Wood had never heard of anyone in their world being able to wield divine-level healing magic. According to the clergy of the Dragon Kingdom, divine-level healing was a gift granted by the gods themselves, capable of bringing the dead back to life. I really can't thank you enough for this. I have sworn loyalty to Lord Roswale, otherwise, I would dedicate myself to repaying you, Sir Wood. Ram said. She looked at the slightly weakened Wood and remembered the extraordinary healing power he had just used. Ram realized he wasn't lying. He really had risked his life to help her. For this, even the proud and sharp-tongued Ram knelt down on one knee before Wood to express her gratitude. All right, I helped you because it was a promise I made earlier. No need to go overboard with the thanks, and I don't expect loyalty from you. However, if you care about your sister, I advise you to keep her away from Roswale. That guy is more than he appears. Of course, given your loyalty to him, you may think I am trying to drive a wedge between you two, so it's entirely your choice whether to believe me or not. I'm just trying to make sure that those I've helped don't end up dying for no reason. Ram did indeed have complicated feelings toward Roswale. He was the one who appeared when they were most vulnerable and saved them. Moreover, for years, Roswale had been providing her with magic, allowing her to continue living comfortably. Wood had just made a major sacrifice to help her, so Ram didn't want to contradict him, but she still felt compelled to weakly say, Lord Roswale might be a little strange, but he's a good person. Maybe you just don't know him well enough. Good person or not, I can't say. But at the very least, he's deceptive. The bowel hunter who attacked Amelia in the slums, and the beast user who terrorized Arlem village. Both were hired by him. If I hadn't taken the beast user away, the resulting Ma-beast attack would have endangered Drem as well. It's obvious that Roswale has another goal, and for that goal, he won't hesitate to sacrifice those around him. As I said, believe me or not, that's up to you. Or you could investigate it for yourself. Now, I need to rest. After saying this, Wood pushed the still stunned Ram and Rem out of the room to prepare for a good rest. But when he turned around to look at his room, he realized that, due to the chaos from earlier, it was no longer inhabitable. Sleeping on the floor wouldn't have been a problem, but there wasn't even a bed or bedding left intact. TSK, am I really going to have to sleep outside tonight? Maybe I shouldn't have rushed the two sisters out earlier. I mean, after giving them my room, surely they wouldn't refuse me if I asked to stay in theirs for one night, right? At dawn, sunlight shone through the leaves like sharp blades, waking Wood up. Peeking through the foliage, he saw Subaru teaching Amelia some morning exercises in the courtyard. Indeed, after struggling with his thoughts last night, Wood decided against going to the Anna sisters' room and instead settled down on a tree branch in the courtyard. As they saw Wood jump down from the tree, Amelia and Subaru walked over to greet him, curious. Did you sleep in the tree last night, Sir Wood? Was it because you weren't comfortable in your room? Amelia asked, clearly pleased that Wood had stayed but also worried about whether they had treated him properly. After all, Wood was the young master of the Hoshin Trading Company, and their accommodations were certainly not as luxurious as those of the Anastasia camp. No, that wasn't it. I just tried out a new spell in my room last night, and it ended up causing a bit of a mess. And honestly, I had a good rest in the tree. I have a blessing related to moonlight, so sleeping under the moonlight isn't all that bad. Hearing this, Amelia relaxed a bit, though she was soon intrigued by the new spell Wood had practiced, causing Subaru to become a bit jealous. Was it his imagination, or had Amelia become less reserved with Wood since he became her knight? Lady Amelia, Lord Wood, and Barasu, breakfast is ready. Ram, now in her maid uniform, approached them and informed them that it was time for breakfast. Initially, there was nothing strange about it, but Subaru, always sharp-eyed when it came to beautiful girls, noticed something different about how Ram addressed Wood. Subaru may not have been the best fighter, but his ability to observe and analyze was definitely noteworthy. After living in Roswale's mansion for some time, he had gotten a grasp of the personalities of those in the household. Roswale was still hard to figure out, given how little he appeared. But there was also the tsundere librarian, Beatrice, the sweet, innocent Amelia, the ever-dedicated Ram, and lastly, the sharp-tongued and proud Ram. Unlike Beatrice's tsundere demeanor, Ram's arrogance was the genuine kind. Something that she couldn't completely hide. In the Roswale mansion, aside from Roswale and Ram didn't seem to care about anyone else. Even though she called Amelia my lady, Subaru could never detect much respect. It was merely because Amelia was useful to Roswale. But just now, Subaru had been stunned to hear Ram, typically so sharp and arrogant, call Wood not Sir but Lord Wood. And the tone she used was completely different from how she addressed Amelia. Full of genuine respect. Before Subaru could even begin to figure out what had happened, they reached the dining area, and Subaru was stunned further by Rem's attitude toward Wood. In theory, Amelia held the highest position, followed by Roswell, and then Wood as her knight. Yet Rem ignored everyone else and pulled out a chair for Wood, arranged his utensils, and stood beside him like a personal maid, indifferent to those around her. Chapter 358, The Possibility of Transforming the Assassin's Guild. Rem's relationship with Sir Wood seems to have gotten quite close, Amelia said. Even someone as oblivious as Amelia could see that there was something off about Rem's actions, and so she spoke up. Rem told me last night that she wishes to leave Roswell's mansion and become Sir Wood's personal maid. Since neither I nor Rem have a formal contract binding us, I can't stop her from leaving if she chooses to. Besides, Sir Wood is such an outstanding individual that I believe this will be a good future for Rem. Hearing what Roswell said, everyone present looked surprised. Not only Amelia and Subaru but also Wood, who seemed completely caught off guard and bewildered. Roswell, what's all of this about? Seeing Wood's stunned expression, Amelia immediately knew that Wood also had no prior knowledge of this matter, so she asked Roswell. However, this time, it wasn't Roswell who answered but Ram, standing beside him. Because Lord Wood healed my injuries last night, allowing me to regain my past strength. My sister and I are deeply grateful to Lord Wood. Originally, I should have been the one to follow him, but Ram's words were interrupted by Wood, who looked at Ram and said, I told you before, there's no need for any kind of compensation. A promise is a promise. And besides, I don't want to become the substitute for your sister's burden. Lord Wood is not a burden for Rem. Rem said, her voice steady. This decision is my own. It has nothing to do with my sister or Lord Wood. You said it before, Sir Wood, that Rem is just Rem, and that I should simply be myself. And now I say that I want to stay by your side. That is my will, and also my wish. Wood had no idea how complicated it was to untie the emotional knots that had troubled a Nana girl for years. In the original story, it was Subaru who had managed to untie that knot, causing Rem to devote herself wholeheartedly to him. Last night, Wood did not only what Subaru had done, but he had also restored Ram's lost powers, entirely eliminating the worries in Rem's heart, leading to this result. Subaru didn't understand the difficulty of healing Ram's injuries, but he knew one thing for sure, once again, Wood had gotten ahead of him. Wood's actions last night obviously completed some sort of event, directly maxing out the favorability of the twin Anna sisters. Ram did not reject Rem's wish to follow Wood, in fact, she supported it. After what had happened last night, Ram felt that Wood, who had a similar past to her own, even if not purely a good person, would not harm Rem. Not to mention, despite knowing it would upset her, Wood had still warned her about Roswell's potential danger, implying that Rem would actually be safer with him. As for whether what Wood said about Roswell hiring assassins was true, Ram couldn't be sure yet. Now that her strength had returned, she planned to investigate that matter on her own. Truth be told, Ram hoped that everything was just a misunderstanding on Wood's part. After all, she couldn't deny that besides wanting to repay her debt, she also had other emotions toward Roswell. However, to Ram, a devoted sister to her core, even if it was someone she respected and loved like Lord Roswell, she would never forgive anyone who tried to harm Ram. After thinking it over for an entire night, Ram decided that it was safest for Rem to stay by Wood's side, who was strong enough to protect her, while she would investigate the truth of what Wood had said. Ram's restoration of her Anna powers added a significant strength to Amelia's faction. Under normal circumstances, everyone present should have been happy. However, the atmosphere seemed awkward, as if everyone apart from the determined Ram and Rem had something on their minds. Roswell maintained a smile on the surface, but deep down, he was filled with doubt. How did Wood manage to heal Ram, something that even he, an archmage who had lived for centuries, couldn't achieve? And even more troubling was that the gospel he held hadn't mentioned anything about such an important future event. Roswell didn't particularly care whether Ram regained her Anna powers. After all, in his eyes, the Anna twins were just tools. But the key now was that Wood's abilities were beginning to make Roswell wary. The fact that the gospel provided only vague hints about Wood as a variable was concerning. As for Amelia, she should have been happy that Ram had recovered and regained her powers. However, seeing Ram now become Wood's exclusive maid left her feeling strangely uncomfortable. And Subaru? Well, it was much easier to understand his feelings. He was already hopelessly enamored with Amelia, and now the troublesome twin Anna maids had just been won over by Wood so effortlessly. Subaru felt an intense sense of crisis. Another fellow transmigrator, Wood wasn't only incredibly handsome but also overwhelmingly powerful, and now he was even winning over the hearts of the girls one after another. How was Subaru supposed to compete? Rem and Ram were one thing, but from the beginning, Subaru had always focused on one goal, winning over the goddess Amelia. But now, Wood had already become Amelia's knight. If Subaru fell any further behind, he really would be relegated to nothing more than a supporting character. Everyone, while Ram regaining her powers is certainly worth celebrating, shouldn't we also have a greater sense of urgency right now? The royal selection ceremony started yesterday, and yet, we in Amelia's faction haven't even formulated a battle plan. If this continues, we will be eliminated before we even begin. In an attempt to change his situation, Subaru spoke up at the dining table, his expression filled with confidence as he tried to use his game knowledge to help Amelia gain an advantage in the royal selection. Indeed. Compared to the other 4 candidates, our faction does lack significant advantages. Roswell said, sipping his wine thoughtfully as he began to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of each camp. Cross's faction had everything. Connections, influence, and support from the kingdom's noble class. If none of the candidates did anything, Cross would win by default, as she already had the most support among the populace. Priscilla's Valier family also had considerable wealth and influence, and though she was arrogant, she was undeniably capable. A sharp contrast to Amelia's naivety. Even Felt's faction was formidable, with the Astri family's backing and ties to the previous royal family, which guaranteed the support of the loyalist faction. Then there was Anastasia's faction, seemingly the weakest but actually one of the strongest contenders besides Cross. The Julius family, to which Julius belonged, was also a prominent name in Lenica. On top of that, Anastasia had the massive advantage of wealth. As the head of a successful trading company, she could bring economic prosperity to the kingdom, which was crucial for its strength and stability, making her a strong contender. In comparison, Amelia's faction was the weakest among the 5 candidates. In terms of connections, the only noble they had was Roswell, but he was a marginalized margrave without money or status, operating on the outskirts of noble society. Their economic strength was almost non-existent, given that Roswell's territory was a poor borderland. Their only advantage was military power. Among the factions, their combat strength was among the best. Apart from Reinhard in Felt's faction, no one could compare to Wood in terms of sheer strength. Moreover, they also had Roswell, whose power was unfathomable, and Ram, who had regained her own powers. It was clear that Subaru had thought through his plan the night before. After analyzing the situation of each faction, he took out a map and presented his idea. Given our current situation, we should leverage our military strength. I have 2 thoughts. First, we need to understand the prices of goods in surrounding regions and begin trading in some areas to boost our economic reserves for a prolonged effort. Having played similar games countless times, Subaru was confident in running such a trading model. The concept was simple. Buy low from one city and sell high in another, then bring back some goods from there to sell elsewhere. By doing this, they could quickly amass wealth from price differences. Such a business model only worked in a relatively undeveloped world, where issues like inconvenient transportation and limited information meant that the same goods could have vastly different prices in different cities. Second, apart from accumulating funds, we should also work on building our reputation and achievements. We're already at a disadvantage, and if we fall behind in earning money, it'll be difficult to catch up. So I thought about it and realized that the quickest way to leverage our combat strength and gain recognition is by helping the kingdom eliminate dangerous threats like witch beasts and bandits. I can handle the trading operations, while I'd like Sir Wood, Ram, and Rem to help clear out the threats to the kingdom. Subaru, full of pride, looked as if he had just proven his value to the team. Strength alone wasn't everything. Now Subaru was the strategist, the brain of the team. Warriors might be strong, but a strategist who could plan battles and win wars was the true MVP. Subaru's plan was well thought out, and given their current situation, it was indeed the best option for Amelia's faction. Just as Subaru was basking in his self-satisfaction, Wood stepped in and poured cold water over him. It's a good plan, but implementing it is going to be difficult. Clearing beasts and bandits around the kingdom is doable. Ram has clairvoyance, and I have detection abilities. But making money through trading may not be as simple as you think. As you mentioned, the lack of transportation and limited information might make transporting goods lucrative. But aside from the potential dangers during transportation, information is key. No, rather, profit margins depend heavily on information. Do you know what goods are selling at a high price in each city, and where you can buy goods cheaply? If you don't have this information, executing your plan will be tough. You might even face losses, excluding the transportation cost. As the young master of the Hoshin Trading Company, Wood's words carried significant weight. Thanks to Wood's reminder, Subaru suddenly remembered that this was a real world, not a game. He couldn't simply look up the buy and sell prices of goods from a game menu. Finding out the market prices for goods in each city would be a massive task requiring a lot of manpower and resources. Moreover, trade prices weren't fixed and could fluctuate. If they moved large quantities of goods and the prices dropped significantly, it could leave Amelia's already impoverished faction in a terrible financial situation. Subaru's plan rested heavily on the success of their trading efforts. Without that, his value to the group would be drastically diminished. After all, he couldn't help much when it came to fighting monsters and bandits. Seeing Amelia's admiration for him fading, Subaru felt deeply frustrated, and at that moment, Wood spoke up again. Chapter 359, The Not-So-Simple Elder Sister. Subaru originally thought that after Wood pointed out the flaws in his battle strategy, he would mock him, thus undermining his credibility within the team. However, much to his surprise, even though Wood had indeed highlighted the weaknesses in Subaru's plan, he did not take the opportunity to ridicule him. Instead, he supported Subaru's plan and even offered a solution to the problem he had mentioned. Given the current state of our faction, financial support is essential if we want to secure victory. Therefore, I am in favor of trading and commerce. As for the logistics, like intelligence gathering on products in various cities and ensuring safety, I have a way to find people who can help. Of course, these people are not likely to work for free. Since we currently lack sufficient funds to pay them outright, I suggest offering them around half of the stock in shares as compensation. The people Wood was referring to were, naturally, members of the underground assassin organization that he had already taken control of. The underground assassin organization, originally focused on assassination jobs, had begun diversifying into intelligence, bounty hunting, and escort missions under Wood's influence. For the time being, the core business of assassination could not be entirely abandoned, otherwise, the organization would struggle to maintain itself. But ever since Wood became a Royal Guard Knight, he had been planning to use his aristocratic connections to help the assassin organization transform itself into something more elite. Simply put, Wood's assassin organization would only take on high-end contracts in the future, such as missions involving the assassination of nobles or wealthy individuals. Of course, higher-tier contracts also meant greater risks, and not every member of the assassin organization would be up to the task. This left many lower-tier members of the organization without regular jobs. Instead of abandoning these lower-level operatives entirely, Wood found a new purpose for them: turning them into intelligence agents. Thanks to their network of contacts, they had been quite successful in their new role. Gathering information on commodity prices and ideal routes between cities was no longer a difficult task for them. Moreover, while these members might lack combat skills compared to elite assassins, they were still far more experienced than average guards or common folk, making them perfect candidates to serve as caravan escorts. We don't need to pay any upfront costs, we just have to promise them a share of the future profits, and you'll be able to find such a group of people? Subaru's expression was filled with amazement after hearing Wood's words. It wasn't that the share of half the profits seemed too high. It was more that Subaru was bewildered as to where Wood would find such agreeable individuals. After all, their plans for commercial trade were still in their infancy. Subaru had experience with similar scenarios in games and was confident about the general idea. However, to others, they were simply newbie merchants. Why would anyone invest in them when they had no experience or reputation? You don't need to worry about that, Wood replied calmly. I'll bring in a reliable team. As for how to maximize profits from trading and negotiating with other merchants, that will be your area of expertise. Even though Subaru had no idea whether the people Wood planned to bring in were reliable or not, he still accepted the task. His reasoning was simple. With the goddess Amelia watching, how could a man say he wasn't up to the challenge? Besides, Wood had already done so much. If Subaru didn't make an effort to catch up, he would be nothing more than a bystander. Of course, there was another key factor. Subaru wasn't afraid of the dangers involved. Even if he ended up dying due to bad luck, his ability, return by death, would simply reset time. While Amelia's faction was finalizing their strategy, the core members of Anastasia's faction were also holding a strategy meeting in a lavish room at a luxury hotel. If one looked closely, it would become apparent that besides Anastasia and her knight Julius, all the other core members of her faction were demi-humans. Demi-humans referred to humanoid races, and the demi-humans in Anastasia's faction were primarily beastmen. There were 4 demi-humans present. One was a canine beastman over 2 meters tall, with dark brown fur and a wolf-like face. The other 3 were small feline beastmen, each barely reaching Anastasia's waist, and all 3 were rare triplets. The 2-meter-tall canine beastman was named Ricardo Welkin, leader of Anastasia's personal mercenary group, Iron Fangs. Like Anastasia, Ricardo had no divine protection and no magic, but his formidable physique and beastly combat instincts made him a force to be reckoned with. In fact, he had once challenged Julius out of dissatisfaction, and their duel had ended in a draw. Of course, that was largely because Julius had held back. Still, the finest knight acknowledged that Ricardo's abilities were among the best, even within the Royal Guard. Ricardo had known Anastasia and Wood since their childhood in Karagi. As he had taken care of them from a young age, he was more like a non-blood-related father to them. As for the feline triplets, They were named Mimi, Hetaro, and Tiv. Mimi, the eldest sister, was carefree and cheerful. The second brother, Hetaro, was serious and level-headed, while the youngest brother, Tiv, was smart but stubborn and acted mature beyond his years. The three had been abandoned in the wilderness by their parents when they were born, only to be found and taken in by Wood and brought to the Hoshin Trading Company. For Mimi and her siblings, who had been abandoned as infants, the Hoshin Trading Company was their true family. Ricardo was a father figure, and Anastasia and Wood were like their sister and brother. The triplets possessed a shared blessing called the Trinity Blessing, which allowed them to share pain, combat injuries, and emotions among themselves. Mimi was the strongest of the three, but her brothers often took it upon themselves to share her injuries, leading her to never fully understand what it meant to feel pain when she fell. Although they were young, the triplets served as the vice-captains of Iron Fangs, thanks to their combination technique known as Resonance Wave. They could even surpass Ricardo's strength when they fought together. In addition, besides Mimi, who had the strongest magic, Hetaro and Tiv specialized in water magic and fire magic, respectively. During the Anastasia faction's strategy meeting, which primarily concerned the royal selection, a disagreement quickly arose among the core members. Julius believed that, although Anastasia's faction was not in the weakest position, winning the throne wouldn't be easy. Currently, among the 5 candidates, Cross Karsten appeared to be the strongest contender in both influence and power. Thus, Julius proposed that Anastasia first form an alliance with the weaker factions to eliminate Cross, the strongest candidate, and then gradually vie for the throne afterward. As for who they should ally with, Julius already had someone in mind. Amelia's faction. Considering their current position, Amelia's faction was the weakest in terms of influence, wealth, and reputation. If Anastasia offered an olive branch, they would most likely accept. Besides, Amelia's knight, Wood, was Anastasia's brother. Their natural familial connection would make the collaboration smoother. Although Amelia's faction lacked wealth, influence, and connections, they did have considerable combat power. If they needed to deal with someone as overpowered as Reinhard, Julius believed Wood's strength would be indispensable. Truth be told, there was a reason why Julius was known as the finest knight. Besides his formidable skills, he was also highly intelligent and had great strategic insight. His suggestion was undoubtedly the best course of action for Anastasia. Uniting with the weak to defeat the strong, and then ultimately eliminating the weaker members to ensure their supremacy. This was a classic strategy used in warfare. However, the key issue was that Anastasia did not want to ally with Amelia's faction. In fact, her first target was Amelia. Her reasoning was simple. Anastasia believed that her brother would have been bewitched by that half-elf, Amelia, which led him to become her knight and stay by her side. Wood might be powerful, but Amelia was a half-elf who looked exactly like the Witch of Envy. Satella. For all Anastasia knew, Wood could have fallen victim to some spell. Ricardo argued that with Wood's strength, it would be impossible for him to fall for any enchantment, even if it came from the Witch of Envy herself. Unfortunately, even his words failed to sway Anastasia. She was determined to act against Amelia, and Mimi, Hetaro, and Tiv shared her stance. Mimi simply followed Anastasia's lead, agreeing that family should be together. Hetaro and Tiv, on the other hand, idolized Wood from a young age and had no wish to become enemies with him. Whether Wood was under some kind of magic or not, if they eliminated Amelia, Wood's role as her protector would be meaningless. I think you're all crazy. Julius snapped. Amelia's faction lacks influence and connections. If we simply leave them be, they are bound to be eliminated eventually. And now you want to focus on taking down the weakest faction instead of dealing with Cross, the real threat? How exactly do you plan to eliminate Amelia's faction? By force? Even if I hate to admit it, even if we all joined forces, I'm not sure we could defeat Wood. Ricardo, Mimi, and the others made no attempts to argue against Julius's point. Being as close as family, they understood Wood's strength very well. Ricardo had even described Wood as a born warrior. Though he had never encountered the Witch of Envy, Ricardo believed that Wood would not necessarily lose to someone like her. His faith in Wood's abilities spoke volumes. No, eliminating Amelia doesn't require direct confrontation. All it takes is using the power of public opinion. As Anastasia spoke, a rather malicious plan formed in her mind. Despite Anastasia's innocent appearance, even with her childish face, she was far from an easy opponent. Out of all 5 candidates for the throne, Cross was a charismatic leader, Priscilla was a sharp-tongued sundeer, and both Amelia and Felt were naive and innocent. Anastasia, on the other hand, was a cunning and calculating woman, willing to take extreme measures to achieve her goals. It wasn't surprising. Unlike the others, who had either lived comfortably or were generally naive, Anastasia had fought her way out of poverty. She was a true survivor of the slums. The slums were chaotic, and as a woman, Without shrewdness, Anastasia could never have founded the Hoshin Trading Company or become the president of Karagi's largest merchant association. There were rumors that Wood had played a crucial role in her success, but in reality, Anastasia had built the Hoshin Trading Company herself, with Wood only ensuring her safety. As a merchant, Anastasia understood the value of reputation. Her initial idea was to use the Iron Fang's mercenary group to spread malicious rumors against Amelia throughout the capital. Amelia was a half-elf who bore a striking resemblance to Satella. That alone was a severe disadvantage for her. The populace was often ignorant, and once public sentiment began to turn, Amelia's chances of becoming the next ruler would be doomed. And all of this could be done without losing a single soldier. Hearing Anastasia's rather cruel plan, Julius, who held himself to high moral standards as the finest knight, naturally rejected such underhanded tactics. However, Anastasia was having none of it. She argued that business was war, and that spreading rumors about one's opponent was simply part of the game. She accused Amelia of ensnaring her beloved brother, and now she wanted to retaliate. While Anastasia and Julius were locked in a heated argument over their differences, a Hoshin Trading Company staff member suddenly rushed into the room. "President, there's been an incident with our caravan destined for the capital. Not only have all the transported goods been lost, but we've also lost nearly all contact with the Iron Fang's mercenaries who were escorting it." According to the sole survivor, a dense fog suddenly engulfed them on their journey. Everyone, whether ground dragons or beastmen, became disoriented in the mist. It appears they encountered the witch beast, the white whale. Chapter 360, The Fog Witch Beast, the White Whale. The so-called white whale was no stranger to Anastasia and her team. In fact, this monstrous entity could be considered the lifelong enemy of many merchants. The white whale was one of the three great witch beasts, created over 400 years ago by the Witch of Gluttony, who imagined a large creature with a lot of meat that could feed many people. However, instead of becoming a blessing, the whale was imbued with the essence of gluttony, and for 4 centuries, it would sporadically appear, consuming large quantities of people and goods. Large cities, though densely populated, had formidable barriers and defensive strength, leading the intelligent white whale to avoid them as targets. Because of this, trading caravans, high in numbers yet weak in defense, became the preferred targets of this beast. The reason it was called the Fog Witch Beast was because of its ability to emit thick fog. Whenever it attacked, a dense mist would envelop the surroundings, concealing its movements and allowing it to launch attacks without revealing itself. This strategy made the white whale elusive, difficult to track, and nearly impossible to defeat. Apart from its troublesome abilities, the whale was incredibly powerful, with monstrous magic and combat capabilities. The previous sword saint, Thergia van Astri, Reinhardt's grandmother, had once attempted to slay the beast, only to lose her life in the battle. No one knew the details of Thergia's battle with the white whale, but many suspected her demise was linked to the fact that young Reinhardt had received the Astri family's sword saint blessing. The Astri family blessing differed from mothers; it could only belong to one person at a time. When Reinhardt inherited it, Thergia had to die. However, this was just speculation. Even if Thergia died fighting the whale, it wasn't surprising. As the strongest among the three great witch beasts, the white whale's strength was not to be underestimated. It had wreaked havoc for over 4 centuries, and countless hunting parties had vanished without a trace. Many people didn't even know what it looked like or what abilities it possessed. This time, the missing goods were extremely valuable. Intended to win over noble families in the royal capital and build new connections. If this cargo couldn't be recovered, it would be a significant blow to the Hoshin Company. Additionally, the Iron Fang mercenaries assigned to protect the goods were also unaccounted for. Maintaining a private mercenary company was costly, and the members sent from Karagi to the capital were among the best. In short, the sudden disaster threw Anastasia's plans into disarray. Without the cargo and the elite mercenaries, her chances of winning the royal selection would become even slimmer. Tell me the location of the incident. With the strength of our Iron Fang elite, even if the opponent is the white whale, they shouldn't be wiped out instantly. If I head there now, I might still be able to save some people and recover the goods. The Fog Witch Beast was only interested in food. If the cargo wasn't edible, there was a chance it could be retrieved if they acted quickly enough. Wilhelm understood how important this shipment was to Anastasia, and he couldn't ignore the fate of his trapped mercenaries. He began gearing up, ready to leave for the incident site. Do you intend to go after the white whale with just a handful of people? That's nothing short of suicide. Seeing Wilhelm grab his weapon and make for the door, Julius stepped forward to stop him. Though Julius had never faced the Fog Witch Beast, its reputation was too great to be ignored. Since the previous sword saint had died to it, Julius doubted Wilhelm could defeat it alone. Even if it means dying, I will go to save my comrades. Sir Knight, stay here and protect Lady Anastasia. I never asked you to join me in death. The Iron Fang was composed almost entirely of beastmen, and Wilhelm, as their leader, was both respected and beloved by his people. Now, with his comrades' fates uncertain, the bold and honorable Wilhelm couldn't simply stand by. Julius, half amused and half frustrated by Wilhelm's words, began to question his choice of faction. Anastasia's insistence on targeting Amelia was one thing, but now her mercenary leader seemed to be just as headstrong. Still, Julius had sworn loyalty to Anastasia as her knight and would never betray that. So, instead of responding to Wilhelm's provocations, he explained calmly. I'm not against rescuing your comrades or retrieving the cargo. I just think charging in blindly is foolish. Wilhelm wanted to retort, but Anastasia raised her hand to stop him and gestured for Julius to continue. As I mentioned earlier, the former sword saint, Tertia van Astri, died at the hands of the White Whale. From what I know, her husband, known as the Sword Devil Wilhelm, has spent his life chasing the beast, seeking vengeance for his wife. To this end, he left the Astri family and became Cross's butler. The tragic love story between the Sword Saint and the Sword Devil was well known in the capital, and Julius was no exception. When Julius brought it up, Anastasia quickly understood what he was getting at. You're suggesting we tell the Sword Devil about the White Whale and draw Cross's faction into this? Seeing Anastasia voice his thoughts, Julius nodded subtly. If he overlooked her tendency for sibling overprotection, Anastasia's intelligence was indeed commendable. Correct. Cross holds Wilhelm in high regard, and if he wishes to hunt the whale, Cross is likely to support him. Moreover, the White Whale, being one of the 3 great witch beasts, has long endangered merchant caravans traveling through Lenuka, causing immense suffering for merchants. If Cross's faction succeeds in slaying it, their reputation and achievements in the kingdom will skyrocket. Supporting her subordinate and gaining an advantage in the royal selection. Cross won't let such an opportunity pass, even if she knows we're using her. If they could ally with Cross's faction to hunt the White Whale, the power of House Karsten would significantly increase their chances of success. Even if Cross's reputation reached new heights as a result, it wouldn't be a loss for Anastasia's faction. They were planning to go after the whale anyway, and now they could team up with Cross, boosting their chances of success while gaining some of the credit and salvaging the Iron Fang members and lost cargo. From a long-term perspective, eliminating the White Whale would greatly benefit future Hosh and Company trade routes. Raising their odds, earning credit and reputation, rescuing their people, and retrieving the goods. This was a 4-fold win. Even Anastasia had to admit Julius's idea was brilliant. He wasn't called the greatest knight for nothing. Due to the situation with the lost cargo, Anastasia temporarily abandoned her plan to target Amelia, and instead, began preparing supplies for the whale hunt. Though most of the cargo had been taken, with her long-established connections and eloquence, Anastasia was quickly able to gather resources for the Iron Fang. Wilhelm and the 3 Mimi siblings set out to rally the Iron Fang mercenaries. Meanwhile, Mimi, ever playful, slipped away from her brothers when they weren't paying attention, sneaking off in a certain direction. Julius, acting as an envoy, headed for House Karsten to negotiate their collaboration for the White Whale hunt. Compared to the bustling preparations of Anastasia and Cross's factions for the major undertaking of hunting the White Whale, Amelia's faction was slowly but steadily making progress. Wood, Rem, and Amelia spent several days hunting dangerous creatures and bandits around the kingdom, earning them official commendations from the Knights of Lenuka. Though the results were modest, they did help change public opinion about Amelia, gaining her a small number of supporters. These newfound supporters were mostly families of those harmed by witch beasts and bandits. Amelia avenged them, and in return, these families chose to support her purely out of gratitude. Ram accompanied Wood and the others during these expeditions, but in reality, she was already investigating Roswell in secret. To be fair, Roswell had been good to her, and she shouldn't act against him. Yet what Wood had said earlier still nagged at Ram. For the devoted sister like her, she could endure anything. Even give up her life with a smile. But harm her sister, and all bets were off. Even if it were God himself, or her own parents, they'd have to answer for it. Sir Wood, the magic techniques you've taught me have been incredibly helpful. I never thought ice magic could be manipulated through shape to suit different situations. And I never imagined that the reactions between different spells could enhance their power, as you explained with those physical reactions. During their hunts, Wood took time to share magic techniques with Amelia. Though both were from magical worlds, the magic of the Mushoku Tensei world and this one had notable differences. In this world, only those who possessed the right magic attribute could use the corresponding spells, whereas in the Mushoku Tensei world, anyone with magical talent could learn any spell, though they would have a natural affinity for a particular element. Most mages focused on their most compatible magic. For instance, Rudius excelled in water magic, with his first mastered satyr spell being of the water element. Wood, on the other hand, specialized in fire magic. Under the influence of the heart of God, he could even barely cast something comparable to a divine tier fire spell. However, this world's magic had its own strengths. It required shorter chance, making spellcasting much faster. A boon, though less relevant to Wood, who could already use silent casting. There was also another major advantage: in the absence of sufficient personal mana, mages could directly draw mana from the atmosphere, which wasn't possible in the Mushoku Tensei world. Wood, being blessed with magical talent, could use both fire and wind magic. So during their expeditions, he also exchanged insights on magic techniques with Amelia. More accurately, Wood sought advice from the spirit Puck. Though Puck appeared to be a cute mascot anyone could pet, Wood recently learned from Rem that Puck was known as the Great Spirit of Fire, feared by many as the Beast of the End. By learning fire magic from the Great Spirit of Fire, and wind magic from Rem, Wood's mastery of local magic improved by leaps and bounds. As a gesture of goodwill, Wood also taught Amelia some combat techniques, helping her make up for her lack of battle experience. Rem, seeing Wood patiently instructing Amelia, also wanted to learn. However, unlike Amelia, who had strength but lacked experience, Rem's skills and combat experience were already excellent. She didn't need further training. Feeling snubbed, Rem turned to Rem, who in turn confronted Wood with a scowl. She pointed out that since Puck had taught Wood fire magic, and he had shared his combat knowledge with Amelia, and she herself had taught Wood wind magic, why hadn't Wood taught anything to Rem? Chapter 361, The Price of Generosity, Gut Removal? Under Rem's scolding, Wood's student count went from 1 to 2. However, considering that Rem indeed didn't need additional combat lessons due to her formidable unclan combat skills and experience, Wood decided to teach her something different. Aside from her expertise with the Morning Star weapon, Rem also had an affinity for water magic, which Roswell once evaluated as being above average. In this world, water magic seemed to be mostly useful for support and healing, which meant Rem usually resorted to using her Morning Star for close combat. Because of that, Wood began teaching Rem the offensive water magic from the world of Mushoku Tensei. At first, Wood was concerned that the different magical systems would make it impossible for anyone but himself, an outsider, to master another world's magic. However, when Rem easily learned the advanced water magic, Spiral Slash, and then used it to cut down a tree as thick as two people embracing, Wood realized his worries had been unnecessary. The magic from the world of Mushoku Tensei could indeed be learned by the natives of this world, but their way of consuming mana seemed to follow the system of this world, making Wood's method unique to him. That's amazing, Lord Wood. I've never seen water magic this powerful before. Did you create it yourself? Rem asked, genuinely in awe. Water magic in this world was mainly used for healing, and even Phoenix, the kingdom's renowned water mage, had limited offensive capabilities. Rem had never imagined that water magic could have destructive power on par with other elemental spells. Naturally, she assumed that Wood must have invented this magic himself. Well, I didn't develop this magic, but I suppose I might be the only one in this world capable of using it. Wood replied casually. Wood's response only made the young Una girl's face fill with even more admiration, and she vowed to learn everything Wood was willing to teach her. If an advanced water spell could be so powerful, then what about the so-called Saint tier, Emperor tier, and even God tier spells that Lord Wood had mentioned? Rem didn't dare to think too much about learning God tier magic, but if she could master Saint tier or King tier spells, then surely she could be of greater help to Lord Wood. While Wood was spending his time fighting monsters alongside a half-elf maiden and an Una-maid, simultaneously building up their goodwill, the unfortunate protagonist of this world was currently heading towards the royal capital, escorting cargo alongside a group of burly men. Through Wood's introduction as an intermediary, Subaru eventually rode a ground dragon to a specific tavern, where he was to meet his so-called business partners. Initially, Subaru had been curious about the partners Wood mentioned, suspecting they might be members of the Hoshin Trading Company. It wasn't unreasonable for Subaru to think so. Wood was the young master of the Hoshin Trading Company, the largest trading company in Karagi, with all the accompanying intelligence networks and services. Besides, their biggest competitor was Cross Karsten, and allying with Anastasia through Wood wasn't out of the realm of possibility. Honestly, Subaru had seen Wood's sister, Anastasia, in the royal hall before. Yet another beautiful girl from this alternate world. Subaru wasn't opposed to the idea of being alone with such a person for negotiations. However, when Subaru arrived at the appointed location, he found that his contact was indeed an alternate world beauty. Just not the one he was hoping for. Instead, it was the black-clad older sister who had once given him terrifying memories. Why is it you? Lord Wood's partner turns out to be you? Does he want me dead? No, Wood knows my ability, so he must know killing me serves no purpose. But why? If he was honest, when it came to looks, body, or charm, The Bowel Hunter was one of the top beauties Subaru had encountered in this alternate world. But as alluring as the Bowel Hunter was, she was also exceedingly dangerous. Getting a glimpse of a seductive lady in stockings from another world was nice, but the price was too high. Every glance came at the cost of having his guts ripped out. Even with the cheat skill returned by death, Subaru would rather not relive the same experience twice. No wonder the meeting place was chosen to be in a town outside the royal capital. It turned out the Bowel Hunter was avoiding the capital's royal guard, due to her status as an assassin. Subaru wasn't sure if the Bowel Hunter was the person Wood had contacted or if his original business partner had been killed by her, and she was simply waiting to ambush him. Hearing Subaru's words and seeing the wariness on his face, Elsa emerged slowly from the corner of the room, her curvy figure swaying as she said dismissively, "I'm the one who will be negotiating this business deal with you. If he truly wanted you dead, there would be no need to go through all the trouble of hiring me. Killing someone as weak as you is a task even our organization's newest recruit could handle with ease. So don't flatter yourself." As a man, being ridiculed by a beautiful woman certainly stung Subaru's pride. He wanted to prove himself, but considering her brutal nature, he eventually had no choice but to swallow his pride and relent. "You say you're here to collaborate, but if I recall correctly, aren't you a member of an underground assassination group? I need intelligence and escort services, so what could assassins like you possibly offer?" Seeing that she wasn't about to attack and realizing that if she did, he wouldn't stand a chance, Subaru's fear started to dissipate. A man who could revive repeatedly could afford to act tough. Even if his guts were ripped out again, Subaru vowed this time to feast his eyes and engrave the sight into his mind. "Who told you that assassins can't gather intelligence or act as mercenaries? Cut the nonsense. Wood may have discussed things with us, but I find a 50-50 split too unfair to us. I demand a 70-30 share. Our group takes 70%, and you take 30%. Before coming here to meet Subaru, Elsa had already been contacted by Wood, who mentioned that although Subaru wasn't particularly strong, his negotiation and commercial skills were noteworthy, making him a decent talent. If the assassination group wanted to transition successfully and secure a stable source of income, cooperating with Subaru was a good option. As for the initial 50-50 profit split, it wasn't set in stone. Wood had given Elsa a bottom line, a 70-30 split. Needless to say, the 30 was for the assassination group. When Elsa saw Subaru, she immediately recognized him as Amelia's lackey. A mere weakling. Elsa couldn't understand why Wood valued Subaru so highly, but as per negotiation protocols, the first step was always to propose a lower offer and work from there. Furthermore, Elsa genuinely felt that they were providing both services and intelligence, while Amelia's camp only provided initial funds and sent an incompetent person like Subaru. There was no reason for them to split the profits evenly. After a long pause, Subaru eventually said, "If you're not serious about negotiating, then I guess I'll just leave." Though Subaru's heart was pounding, he wasn't actually planning to leave. It was a common negotiation tactic, an attempt to secure a better deal for himself. Sure enough, as soon as he made a move to leave, Elsa spoke up, asking him to stay. Seeing things going according to plan, Subaru's face displayed a confident smile. If it came down to combat, even 10 of him would only end up getting their guts spilled in front of Elsa, but when it came to negotiations and business, Elsa was clearly an amateur. "If you think the split isn't fair, we can always negotiate further. The purpose of inviting you here was exactly that, wasn't it?" Seeing Subaru's smug smile, Elsa had to resist the urge to reach for the dagger strapped to her thigh. If it wasn't for Wood's instructions, she would have already gutted him. This wimp, getting a 30% cut was already more than generous, and he still had the gall to haggle with the Bowel Hunter. Noticing Elsa's gaze constantly shifting to his midsection, Subaru quickly realized he might have gotten too carried away and adjusted his demeanor. "I think a 60-40 split is more reasonable. We could still make that work." Wood had initially said the split would be 50-50, with a minimum acceptable deal being 70-30. If Elsa could finalize a 60% share, it would prove her negotiation skills. She was actually ready to agree. However, Subaru then added a crucial detail. He was referring to their group taking only 40%, while Amelia's faction would get 60%. "It seems you really do have a death wish. Though you were introduced by Wood, don't think that we assassins are all benevolent saints. If you don't appreciate our generosity, then I won't hold back." Elsa drew her 2 daggers and, in a flash, lunged at Subaru, aiming to cut through his abdomen, clearly targeting his gut. Having anticipated that Elsa, the Bowel Hunter, would target his intestines, Subaru immediately performed a desperate move, leaning back just enough to narrowly dodge the attack. Wait. Just as you said, we're negotiating. If the offer isn't satisfactory, we can always keep discussing it. There's no need to jump straight to violence. Feeling the cold draft on his exposed midsection and seeing his clothes cut open, Subaru couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. Even with his immortal body, the pain of losing one's kidneys was not something any man wanted to endure. He quickly realized that traditional negotiation tactics wouldn't work with someone like Elsa. She was an assassin. If pushed too far, she would resort to violence. If both sides find the terms unsatisfactory, how about a compromise? Let's stick with the original 50-50 split. We're also investing the initial funds and bearing the risk of trade failure. And if I had to guess, your assassination group, despite your intelligence and strength, can't easily enter major cities because you're all wanted criminals. That's why you need this partnership, isn't it? The assassination group had resources and manpower, they could easily form a team. Yet they chose not to, and it wasn't without reason. Wood had considered forming a trading group long before, but as Subaru pointed out, most members of the assassination group were wanted and couldn't freely enter major cities. Furthermore, credibility was the most critical asset for a merchant. If others knew they were dealing with assassins, who would trade with them? A 40-60 split is our bottom line, and this is only because Wood vouched for you. If we can't reach an agreement with you, we can always find another partner. Whereas Amelia's faction doesn't have as many options, do they? Faced with Elsa's intimidating aura, Subaru finally conceded to a 40-60 split. Amelia's faction taking 40% and the assassins taking 60%. Despite voicing his complaints, Subaru was actually quite satisfied. Before leaving for negotiations, Subaru had discussed it with Roswell and Amelia. Since the assassination group would be providing the manpower and effort, the idea of a 50-50 split seemed a bit too generous. They even worried about ulterior motives. Much like the minimum bottom line would have given Elsa, Subaru had a similar baseline in mind, 30% for Amelia's faction. Now that he had secured 40%, Subaru was more than content. Continuing to haggle and achieving a 50-50 split wasn't entirely impossible, but as Elsa had pointed out, the assassins could afford to take their time or pick another partner. Amelia's camp didn't have such luxury, the royal selection had a deadline, and they needed to amass financial resources quickly. Moreover, apart from the notorious assassins, no one else was willing to work with the half-elf of Calamity. Chapter 362, White Whale Subjugation Operation. I really can't figure out what the boss is thinking. He's actually got us protecting this weakling and even expects us to take orders from him? After successfully negotiating the terms with Elsa, Subaru was eager to get started with the trade expedition. He wanted Elsa to assign the escort team as soon as possible. But it wasn't long before Subaru realized that negotiating with Elsa was just one of many challenges he would face. The issues before him still gave him quite a headache. The guards Elsa assigned to him were indeed experienced and significantly more skilled than a typical mercenary group. However, unlike regular mercenaries who simply followed orders in exchange for payment, these killers from the underworld were far harder to control. Not only were they covered in a constant aura of killing intent, but they also had a rebellious attitude. Despite Subaru supposedly being the head of this caravan, few actually obeyed his commands. If it weren't for the boss being able to keep these maniacs in check, Subaru feared he might be dead before they even reached their destination. Hold up, something seems off. We've traveled down this route many times, and because it's quite remote, we barely ever see anyone here. But judging by the trampled grass and the footprints on the ground, it looks like a lot of people recently came through. The leader of the escort team for this mission was a former head of the underground assassination organization, known by the alias Venomous Thorn. His specialty was creating poisons and executing kills with them. With his level of strength, he really shouldn't have been tasked with something as low-ranking as escort duty. However, considering that this was the group's first collaboration with Subaru and Elsa was concerned about whether the weak Subaru could manage the bloodthirsty killers, she asked Venomous Thorn to oversee the situation. As one of the former leaders of the assassination group, Venomous Thorn was also one of the few who had witnessed Wood's power. He had been completely won over by Wood's strength and had no qualms about following the orders given by their boss. An experienced assassin like Venomous Thorn might have been silent along the way, but that didn't mean he let his guard down for even a second. If it had been just another task assigned by that woman Elsa, it would have been one thing. But since Elsa mentioned it was something the boss wanted done, Venomous Thorn had no choice but to take it seriously. Wood was someone who had effortlessly taken down Mother and instantly defeated Scar, the second in command of the assassin group. With that display of overwhelming power, he had united all of the underground assassination groups. In the eyes of people like Venomous Thorn, Wood was undeniably both strong and ruthless. Failing to complete a task assigned by such a person, Venomous Thorn didn't even want to think about the consequences. Determined to avoid any complications, Venomous Thorn maintained his vigilance throughout the journey, always observing his surroundings with utmost care. It was when their caravan reached a narrow path that Venomous Thorn immediately noticed something was off. The wilderness was different from the main roads due to its sparse foot traffic. Few people traverse these areas regularly. However, Venomous Thorn saw that along the path ahead, the surrounding grass was trampled, and there were numerous tracks, both from ground dragons and people. There might be trouble ahead. I suggest we take another route, he advised cautiously, even though he couldn't be sure if danger lurked ahead. Better safe than sorry. But according to the map, if we change routes, it would take us 3 more days to reach our destination. Subaru replied. Most of the goods we're transporting are fresh. If we delay too long, their value will plummet. Seeing Venomous Thorn, who had been silent and gloomy until now, suddenly speak up made Subaru realize that this was the most dangerous person among them. Normally, Subaru wouldn't dare argue with these killers, but given the current situation, changing routes would result in significant losses. He had already been frustrated with the unruly attitude of these guards, and now decided to muster the courage to oppose them. What's more important? Profits or lives? If we take the detour, we'll simply earn less than expected. But if we push on and encounter something dangerous, and lose all the cargo, who will take responsibility? Look closely, you weakling. The footprints here are clearly from night boots, the kind that only official soldiers or organized military forces wear. And judging from the number of tracks left by both knights and ground dragons, there must have been a considerable number of them passing through recently. I don't know why they were in the middle of nowhere, but they certainly weren't here for sightseeing. If it had been another caravan, there would have been marks from wagon wheels and the prints of regular boots. Not uniform knight footwear. This much was obvious to an experienced person like Venomous Thorn. To Subaru, losing the goods would likely just mean getting chewed out by his master. But for Venomous Thorn, failure meant something far worse. With Elsa adding fuel to the fire, Wood might very well decide to kill him. So Venomous Thorn, usually the quiet type, now grabbed Subaru by the collar, practically shouting at him. Even if it's the Royal Knight Order ahead, as long as it's not a beast, they shouldn't be hostile to us, right? Besides, if the profit doesn't meet expectations, aren't you worried your boss might punish you? Subaru understood what Venomous Thorn was saying, but this was his first assignment and he wanted to do it perfectly, partly to look good in front of Amelia. So he stubbornly stuck to his guns, though he lacked confidence. To be fair, Subaru was pretty smart. In normal circumstances, Venomous Thorn would have already taken him out. But the mention of disappointing Wood and facing punishment made Venomous Thorn hesitant. After wrestling with the decision for a moment, Venomous Thorn proposed a compromise. We could split the cargo in 2. You and some of the unlisted brothers take the fresh goods and proceed ahead. Meanwhile, the rest of us, those with bounties on our heads, will take the rest of the cargo on a detour to the next city. This way, if something goes wrong, we can minimize the damage. If the Royal Knight Order was up ahead, Venomous Thorn and the other notorious assassins would inevitably clash with them. By splitting into 2 groups, they could both get the fresh goods to their destination on time and mitigate the risks of losing everything. If Subaru's group ran into trouble, Venomous Thorn could simply explain to Wood that Subaru, the weakling, had ignored his advice and insisted on continuing, thus causing the losses. After thinking over Venomous Thorn's proposal, Subaru agreed, seeing it as a win-win solution. While his group might seem to be in greater danger, Subaru's return by death ability made him feel more confident. Even if they did run into trouble, he could always die, reset, and then agree to Venomous Thorn's detour. Just as Venomous Thorn and Subaru finished splitting their forces and were about to set off on different paths, a thick fog suddenly rolled in, enveloping them at great speed. Cut to 2 days earlier. Anastasia had managed to quickly gather all the strategic supplies, and Wilhelm and the Mimi triplets were ready to move at a moment's notice. Julius had also used his eloquence and negotiation skills to swiftly secure an agreement with Cross's faction, persuading them to join in the White Whale subjugation. The Karsten family was one of the few ducal houses in the Kingdom of Lanuka, with a long history of military service and loyalty to the royal family. They also had their own sizable guard force, to fulfill Wilhelm's desire for vengeance and to fully bring him under her command. Not to mention for the glory of slaying the White Whale. Cross agreed to the cooperation, even if she knew Julius had ulterior motives. It was simple. Whether or not Anastasia intended to use them as pawns, Cross had always intended to slay the White Whale. With someone willing to help, and with Cross taking the lion's share of the credit, she had no reason to refuse. When Cross led Wilhelm, Phoenix, and several hundred family guards, as well as Wilhelm's group, led by Wilhelm, to confront the White Whale on the wasteland, they quickly realized that the subjugation wouldn't be as straightforward as they had hoped. They had already heard about some of the White Whale's abilities beforehand, so Cross and her group had come prepared. As the fog settled around them and the whale's cry echoed above, Cross ordered her troops to fire special flares into the sky. These high-powered flares not only pierced through the darkness but also interfered with the mana in the air. No matter how powerful the white whale's fog was, it was ultimately fueled by its own mana. Under the interference of the flares, the night turned as bright as day, and the surrounding fog vanished. With the fog cleared, the subjugation force finally caught sight of the legendary white whale. One of the three great beasts, also known as the fog beast. It looked like a massive white whale swimming through the sky, with a horn on its head, terrifying glowing red eyes, a large pink halo above it, a body over 50 meters long, and countless vent holes and white fur covering its surface. Its enormous size and menacing appearance left many present momentarily stunned. However, Gross showed her remarkable leadership skills at that moment. She not only snapped her troops out of their daze but also organized an immediate attack. Although the fog had been cleared, the ensuing subjugation didn't go as smoothly as they hoped. The white whale could fly, staying hundreds of meters in the air. Most spells couldn't reach it at that height unless they were joint magic attacks or high-powered spells that consumed a lot of mana. If even the magic users struggled, then knights and warriors were even worse off. Apart from Wilhelm, Julius, and a few elite fighters like Wilhelm, most warriors were stuck on the ground, unable to even touch the white whale. In addition to its massive size, the white whale's fur provided a significant defense against both magical and physical attacks. Due to its size and limited attackers, the white whale hadn't sustained any critical damage. To make matters worse, the white whale possessed two powerful abilities beyond its usual fog. The abilities to create clones and use vanishing mist. As the name suggests, the cloning ability allowed the white whale to produce two replicas, each slightly weaker than the original but with independent combat capabilities. As for vanishing mist, it was an enhanced fog that could make anything it touched disappear from the world, erasing the memories of those who knew the target. Using vanishing mist required a great deal of mana, and even a massive creature like the white whale couldn't use it as casually as its regular fog. It could only emit it intermittently in a mist column from its vent holes. But the power of vanishing mist was undeniable. Part of Cross's guard had just been engulfed by the mist, and their existence had been erased instantly. No one remembered their names or had any memories of them, but Cross knew exactly how many people she had brought to subdue the white whale. Though she couldn't remember who was missing, she knew for sure it was the white whale's doing. Among those present, only Wilhelm, Reinhard, and Julius could deal substantial damage to the white whale. Had they been able to focus their efforts on a single white whale, they might have taken it down quickly, allowing the others to join the attack. But now, with the sudden appearance of two clones, the already limited firepower had to be spread even thinner. Chapter 363, The Collateral Damage of the World's Child. I'll keep two of them busy. You all take this opportunity to break its two pectoral fins. The white whale was a magic beast resembling a whale, with its enormous fins serving as wings for flight. Old gentleman Wilhelm was filled with rage at the sight of the white whale. The beast had killed his wife, and the hatred of that act had stayed with him ever since. The sword demon had dreamt countless times of cutting down the white whale to avenge his beloved. However, given the current situation, Wilhelm had to admit that if they prolonged the battle, it would only work against them. With a total disregard for his life, he engaged two of the white whale's clones alone, hoping Julius and the others could seize the chance to turn the tide. If only I were 20 years younger, I would cut you down myself and avenge her. Wilhelm swung his long sword, a sharp slash shot out like a crescent moon, leaving a deep gash across one of the approaching white whale's faces. Blood sprayed into the air as the beast roared in pain, its deafening call echoing as it crashed toward Wilhelm. Despite his age, Wilhelm's well-trained body was still agile. He kicked off the whale's head and landed on the back of another, his sword plunging into its neck. Considering the white whale's massive size, the damage Wilhelm's sword inflicted should have been quite limited. But judging by the beast's agonizing cries, it was clear that the damage he dealt was significant. Watching Wilhelm seriously injure two of the white whale's clones in a matter of moments, Wilhelm's comrade Wilken, wielding a broad-bladed sword, couldn't help but comment. This old man is really something. If he were 20 years younger, he could probably take down the white whale on his own. Even if it was just a clone, it still possessed the same size and considerable power as the original white whale, something Wilken understood all too well after fighting against it earlier. Don't underestimate that old man. Julius replied, full of trust in Wilhelm's strength. He is called the Sword Demon for a reason. For now, all we need to do is focus on bringing down the original white whale. Wilhelm will handle the clones. Unlike Wilken, who didn't know Wilhelm well, Julius had complete faith in Wilhelm's abilities. Growing up in the capital, Julius had heard stories of Wilhelm's prowess for as long as he could remember. The sword demon Wilhelm was a legendary figure in the capital. In his youth, he had an indomitable spirit, unmatched by ordinary men. His swordsmanship was exceptional, and yet he possessed no blessings. In this world, Lacking a blessing or an aptitude for magic put one at a great disadvantage compared to those blessed by the world. But Wilhelm had been proud in his youth. He believed that even without blessings or magic, with enough effort, he could become a strong person in his own right. Without a blessing or magic, Wilhelm had devoted his entire being to the sword, offering his soul to the art of swordsmanship. Through sheer determination, he reached a level on par with the sword saint. During the closing ceremony of the demi-human war, Wilhelm even challenged Thersia van Astri, the then current sword saint who was being honored, and defeated her despite lacking blessings and magic. That was how Wilhelm earned the title of Sword Demon. A tale that became legend. The sword saint's blessing was unique, meant for one wielder in the world, and Thersia was one of the 3 heroes of her era. That alone showed how powerful she was. Yet, even against someone like Thersia, Wilhelm won, proving the strength of his swordsmanship. Years passed, and time had worn down Wilhelm's sharp edges. The once reckless swordsman who would strike anything close enough had become calm and composed. While Wilhelm's raw power had decreased with age, his long years of experience had honed his already exquisite swordsmanship to an even higher level. With the 2 clones occupied, Wilken and Julius had only to deal with the real white whale, primarily avoiding its vanishing mist. As the other aspects of battle were now less challenging. The white whale was large, but precisely because of its size, it wasn't very agile. Little more than a giant, stationary target. After an exhausting struggle, the enormous white whale let out a final faint cry, and its pectoral fins were crippled, causing it to plummet from the sky. Once the white whale lost its ability to fly, it was nothing more than prey waiting to be slaughtered. Both the beastmen of the Iron Fang and the knights of the Karsten family rushed forward, weapons in hand, ready to finish off the magic beast. Under normal circumstances, the white whale would likely be beaten to death by the Iron Fang mercenaries and Karsten family knights, bringing an end to the battle. However, just as the beastmen and knights moved to strike the fallen white whale, an unexpected development occurred. A group of individuals dressed in black robes, identifying themselves as members of the witches' cult, suddenly entered the battlefield. The beastmen and knights charging towards the white whale found their bodies suddenly lifted into the air as they ran. With screams echoing from above, these well-trained knights and powerful beastmen were torn apart mid-air, their bodies splitting into pieces. Blood splattered down like a fountain, covering the ground with dismembered remains in mere moments. Judging by the mangled corpses, it was apparent that these knights and beastmen had fallen victim to some sort of forceful attack, their bodies violently torn apart. Look what we have here. A group of beastmen and knights attempting to hunt the fog beast. The white whale. Although we have no personal connection, as one of the Sin Archbishops, I cannot stand by and watch the pet of another witch being killed like this. Surely, someone as diligent as myself will receive the witch's affection. While you slothful beings will soon pay for it with your lives here. The individual who appeared and began rambling nonsense was a crazed man with short green hair, whose face was devoid of any color, and whose skin seemed to be almost necrotic. As soon as Julius saw the man with green hair and the others in black robes, he immediately warned his allies. As the vice-captain of the Royal Guard, Julius could hardly be ignorant of the infamous witches' cult. He recognized this madman as Betelgeuse Romani Conti, the Sin Archbishop of Sloth. The witches' cult was a religious group that worshipped the Witch of Envy, Satala, made up of Sin Archbishops and faceless followers. Their primary goal was related to the resurrection of the Witch of Envy. Each Sin Archbishop carried a witch factor. And because they were unrestrained and ruthless, most were complete lunatics wanted by kingdoms far and wide. The Sin Archbishop of Sloth was anything but idle. He was actually the most active member of the witches' cult. Therefore, the Royal Guard had ample information on him. The Sloth Archbishop carried a gospel, which was essentially a more powerful version of Roswell's Book of Wisdom, giving him instructions and guidance for his next moves. Sloth referred to this guidance as the witch's love and would act with fervent diligence to earn even more affection from her. The reason Sloth appeared here was due to the instructions within his gospel. It informed him that someone with strong connections to the witch would soon be in the area. The book said that if he saved the white whale, this person would appear. So even though Sloth had no connection to the fog beast, he chose to intervene. Just as they had finally brought down the white whale, another Sin Archbishop of the witches' cult intervened. Cross, as the commander of the subjugation force, gritted her teeth in frustration. There were not many members of the witches' cult present, but even one Sin Archbishop, especially Sloth, was a formidable enemy. His abilities were unknown, but his strength was undeniable. Before the knights and beastmen even realized what was happening, they had been dismembered. Due to his strong affinity with spirits, Julius could sense that Sloth's attacks were something invisible. But sensing them was all he could do, he couldn't determine their exact location or number. Aside from his invisible attacks, Sloth also had an ability called mental pollution. which affected a large area, inflicting mental torment on enemies within its range. Only those with high spirit affinity could resist the attack, which was why many beastmen and knights screamed in agony and collapsed after approaching Sloth. Wilhelm continued to fight the two clones in the air, while Julius and the others struggled to even get past Sloth, let alone deal a finishing blow to the downed white whale. As one of the three great beasts, the white whale also possessed powerful regenerative abilities. Its pectoral fins gradually began to heal over time. With a loud call, the massive white whale flew into the sky once more. The intervention of the Slothsin Archbishop resulted in heavy losses for Iron Fang and the Karsten family. As an excellent commander, Cross knew that if they continued to fight, they would be wiped out entirely. She decisively ordered a retreat, planning to regroup and make another attempt after reorganizing. However, the problem lay with the white whale. It was no ordinary magic beast. It was incredibly intelligent. As one of the three great beasts, it was not a raid boss you could just respawn whenever you wanted and attempt over and over. The white whale, having regained control of the sky, let out a piercing call and released thick fog from the many vents on its body. Prepare the special flares. It's trying to block our vision with its mist again. Cross quickly shouted to her subordinates as she saw the white fog spreading around the white whale in the sky. But Lady Cross, we've run out of flares. The team leader looked at Cross with a troubled expression, explaining that the prolonged two-day battle had exhausted their supply of flares, which interfered with mana. Originally, they had prepared enough strategic supplies to easily defeat the white whale, but no one had expected a Sin Archbishop of the Witches' cult to suddenly appear. Damn it. Everyone, listen up. Mount your dragons and escape the fog's range as fast as you can. Once you were enveloped by the white whale's fog, escaping was impossible. Cross knew this well, so her only choice was to try and save as many as she could. Cross and the members of Iron Fang began to retreat, but the white whale wasn't about to let them get away. The dense fog spread out rapidly, surging like waves toward Cross and Anastasia. At the same time, Subaru and Venomous Thorn's caravan had just entered the area, right as they had decided to split up. Before they could move, the expanding fog engulfed them. Julius, you damn bastard. And Anastasia too. Seeing Julius and Anastasia riding their ground dragons toward him, Subaru was utterly confused. He initially thought their trade plans had somehow been exposed. But soon, Venomous Thorn stepped forward, glaring at Julius and Anastasia and growling. It's your lot, isn't it? You messed with the fog beast and then came running to drag us into it. Unlike the clueless Subaru, Venomous Thorn, who had been active in the underworld for years, immediately recognized the fog surrounding them. It was the white whale, one of the three great beasts. It was said that no one ever escaped its pursuit. Judging by the tracks earlier, it was clear that Julius and his group had come prepared to face it. But it seemed they had failed, and now they were dragging the enraged white whale toward them, getting them all caught up in this. We sincerely apologize for this. Julius said, the virtues of a knight shining through. We didn't expect to find others passing through this area. Chapter 364, Is she the boss's sister? Is this really the time for apologies? Instead of blaming each other, wouldn't it be better to think about how to escape this predicament? Cross was quick to speak up, following closely behind. Compared to the more agile beastmen of Iron Fang on the grasslands, her knights had suffered greater losses. Seeing Natsuki Subaru and the others pause for a moment, Cross made it clear that this was not the time for infighting. Escape from this predicament? That's easy for you to say, noble lady. This is the fog beast we're talking about. I've never heard of anyone escaping from its clutches. Venomous Thorn was furious. What was supposed to be a simple task had suddenly turned into an encounter with the fog beast. Their luck couldn't have been worse. You all seem to have some skills. Judging by your aura, you're clearly not an ordinary mercenary group. You mentioned the fog beast. We had it cornered at one point. If not for the interference of that Sin Archbishop from the Witches' cult, we might have already defeated the white whale. Even within its fog, the Witches' cult members are also affected, and the white whale still bears the injuries from our earlier fight. So, we're not entirely without a chance. Cross could tell that Subaru's caravan members, aside from Subaru himself, were far from ordinary. Each of them had significant power, not inferior to her Karsten family knights. Furthermore, Elsa had arranged for over 100 assassins, including Venomous Thorn, as bodyguards, ensuring a formidable defense. You're telling me that apart from the fog beast, even the despicable Witches' cult is here. Hearing Cross's words, Venomous Thorn's expression darkened further. If their assassin group was like rats in a ditch, then the Witches' cult were despicable pests even to them. A group of genuine lunatics, even the underground world avoided them. Nothing good ever came from an encounter with the Witches' cult. I think killing you lot for dragging us into this mess is a more realistic goal than trying to escape from both the fog beast and the Witches' cult. Facing only the fog beast was already more than troublesome. Now, on top of that, they were dealing with the insane witches cult. And an archbishop, no less. This had nothing to do with them originally. Now they were in this predicament because of these people in front of them. As assassins from the underworld, Venomous Thorn and his men were defiant by nature. And now, having been dragged into this unwanted mess, they had no reason to be courteous to Cross's group. If escape was impossible, they might as well take revenge while they still could. Subaru barely understood what the fog beast or the Sin Archbishop represented, but he thought Cross's suggestion was correct. With such a powerful enemy present, cooperation was their best bet, not wasting energy fighting among themselves. However, Venomous Thorn and his men were not listening to Subaru. Previously, they followed Subaru's orders only out of fear of Wood's power. But now, faced with certain death, no one wanted to listen to the weakling. Actually, we may not all die here. Before coming to subjugate the white whale, I secretly sought out Brother Wood. He wasn't in the rented villa at the time, but the attendant said he was out dealing with some magic beasts and would likely return by evening. So, I left a letter. The one who spoke was Mimi Pearlbutton, the eldest of the triplet beastman siblings, whose carefree and confident demeanor showed that she had snuck off earlier to find Wood. To Mimi, no matter what faction Wood belonged to, he was still Brother Wood and their family. If he found out they were heading out to face the dangerous white whale, Wood would definitely not sit idly by. Brother Wood, my foot. It's because of people like you that we got targeted by the fog beast and the witches cult. Normally, I wouldn't kill kids, but today, I'll make an exception. An assassin from Subaru's group, infuriated by Mimi's words, pulled out his sword, aiming to cut the cat-eared girl down. Seeing the assassin rush toward Mimi, both Julius and Wilkin reacted immediately, intending to protect her. However, before they could reach her, someone acted even faster. With a grunt of pain, the assassin spiraled backward, knocked away in an instant. The one who made the move was none other than Venomous Thorn, whose face had been filled with resentment until just moments ago. "Boss, what are you doing?" The assassin, reeling from the punch and spitting out teeth, stared at Venomous Thorn in confusion. "Who the hell is your boss? Have you forgotten our new rule? Anyone who attacks children or pregnant women is to be stabbed to death. And I think this young lady made a good point. If you dare mess with her again, I'll end you myself." Venomous Thorn first shot a fierce glare at the downed assassin before turning to Mimi. Then, forcing a smile that looked utterly out of place, he asked, "Are you all right, little one? My subordinate was rude, and I've taught him a lesson for you." Everyone around them was stunned at Venomous Thorn's abrupt change of attitude toward Cross and Mimi. The difference was just too blatant. The most surprised was Subaru. He had came to know Venomous Thorn's personality well during their time together. Cunning, ruthless, and rebellious. His attitude toward Cross was his usual demeanor. But now, Subaru, a self-proclaimed nerd from modern society, had a thought. Was Venomous Thorn actually a Lilicon? No, calling him a Lilicon might be jumping to conclusions. Maybe it was just a thing for cat ears? However, Subaru's wild thoughts were soon dispelled by Venomous Thorn's next words. After awkwardly squeezing out a smile, Venomous Thorn softened his voice and asked Mimi, "Little one, what is your relationship with Brother Wood? And when do you think Brother Wood might arrive here?" Mimi proudly placed her hands on her hips and replied, "I'm Brother Wood's family. Brother Wood is incredibly strong. Whether it's the White Whale or a Sin Archbishop, they wouldn't stand a chance if Brother Wood came here. Big Sister Anna is Brother Wood's sister. If he knows Big Sister Anna is in danger, Brother Wood will definitely come running." Hearing Mimi's words, Venomous Thorn's eyes lit up with excitement. The other assassins might not understand who Brother Wood was, but Venomous Thorn did. As one of the former leaders of the assassin organization, he knew that Brother Wood was none other than their true boss. Venomous Thorn had no doubts about Wood's ability to defeat the White Whale or the Sin Archbishop. Wood had already proven his power during the assassin organization gathering. Moreover, Venomous Thorn and the other leaders knew through back channels that their boss had fought to a standstill with none other than the Sword Saint. A fight with no clear winner. Reinhard, the current strongest on the surface, was no secret, and Wood, who had fought him to a draw, was undoubtedly a monster among monsters. To Wood, the White Whale and Sloth were likely just slightly stronger nuisances, nothing more. "Which one of you is Anna?" Venomous Thorn quickly found Anastasia among the group, guided by Mimi's gaze. With an overly obsequious smile, Venomous Thorn approached Anastasia and said, "So, you must be Big Sister Anna. You truly are beautiful beyond compare. I apologize for our earlier rudeness. From now on, we will protect you and follow your orders." Venomous Thorn's drastic shift in attitude made it clear to everyone present what had caused the change. It wasn't an affection for cat-eared girls but rather the mention of Anastasia's brother. "Wood Hodgson. Who are you people to my brother?" Anastasia was no fool. Venomous Thorn and his men clearly had murderous auras. They were no ordinary folks, and as far as she knew, her brother wanted to become a knight, which made it unlikely that he had any connection to these people. Big Sister Anna, you're joking. People like us could never truly be connected to Brother Wood. We were saved by him. We used to be rats licking blood off the blade. But after Brother Wood unified us. Through Venomous Thorn's eloquent story, Wood's virtuous, heroic image was clearly painted for everyone. Out of fear of backlash, Venomous Thorn naturally embellished the story as much as possible. Before long, everyone understood, Wood, with a heart of justice, had single-handedly destroyed the underground assassin world. But unable to bear killing them all, he spared them and even gave them a chance to reform, going as far as to arrange jobs for them. Venomous Thorn might have looked sinister, but his flattery was first class. In his emotional retelling, Wood became a powerful and kind knight, almost saintly. Mimi and her 2 siblings were moved to tears, feeling even more admiration for their brother Wood. Even Royal Guard members Julius and Phoenix looked impressed. After all, for assassins to sincerely praise, fear, someone, it must be no easy feat. In that case, stay with us. When Wood arrives, I'll have him thank you all. With Anastasia's words, Venomous Thorn and the 100 assassins immediately moved to stand behind her, pledging their loyalty. On the other hand, Subaru was left standing alone, utterly bewildered. He hadn't yet proven his worth, nor did he have any real fighting skills. Cross and Anastasia had little reason to care whether he lived or died. However, soon after, Sloth caught up with them and launched an attack on Anastasia's group. It was then that Subaru demonstrated his value and became someone they had to protect. Surprisingly, Subaru could see the bizarre attacks from the Sin Archbishop of Sloth. Behind Sloth appeared several pitch-black hands that could extend and split to attack. The crucial part was that no one else could see these unseen hands. Only Subaru. Sloth quickly noticed the unusual aura around Subaru as well. Despite being the Sin Archbishop of the Witches' cult, Subaru's scent of the witch was even stronger than his own. The Archbishop viewed the witch's scent as a sign of her favor. The diligent Sloth could not accept that a random person could receive more favor than himself, and so he attacked Subaru. At the same time, Sloth also realized that Subaru was the special existence mentioned in the Gospel. Sloth was dangerous primarily because of his unseen hands ability. But now, with Subaru able to see them, their power was greatly diminished. With Subaru's guidance, strong fighters like Julius, Wilkin, Cross, and the newly joined Venomous Thorn were no longer struggling as before, managing to push Sloth back consistently. Hook! But just as they prepared to deal with Sloth, a wail cry from within the thick mist made their expressions darken once more. Chapter 365, The Timely Arrival of Wood. The white whale, although a magic beast, possessed considerable intelligence. After trapping everyone with its dense fog, instead of pursuing them further, it first chose to recover from its injuries. While the group was entangled with Sloth, the white whale, hidden within the fog, seized the opportunity and unleashed its ultimate attack, the vanishing mist. Trying to wipe out Julius and the others all at once. The moment they heard the whale's cry, Julius and the others sensed danger. However, as they tried to withdraw, they realized their feet were completely immobile. Your feet are being bound by that guy's invisible hands. Subaru reminded them as he noticed the panic on Julius and his comrades' faces. What's the point of saying that now? I already knew you were useless. For someone as agile as an assassin, the inability to move was deeply unsettling. Venomous Thorn also tried using his poison dagger against the invisible hands. But the attempt was in vain. The invisible hands had a physical form, but they weren't made of flesh and blood. Whether the poison would work or not was uncertain, and Thorn couldn't even pierce them with his dagger. Currently, the group's key fighters had their legs bound by the invisible hands. And with the vanishing mist approaching, the situation was dire. However, this couldn't entirely be blamed on Subaru. He could see the invisible hands. But as an ordinary person, his vision was limited, especially in such a foggy environment. Sloth used the fog as cover, sending his invisible hands crawling along the ground. Something no one could easily detect. Saint-level ice magic, frozen fortress. With Julius and the others immobilized, and the vanishing mist rolling in, just as they were at a loss, the air temperature suddenly plummeted, and a massive ice wall rose from the ground, standing between them and the approaching mist. The mist collided with a thick ice wall, which rapidly began disappearing before their eyes. It wasn't melting or shattering but rather being erased as if it had never existed. Fortunately, as the ice wall was being erased, the concentration of the vanishing mist gradually lessened. In the end, the hundreds of meters long and several meters thick ice wall was reduced to just a few centimeters, but the mist had dissipated entirely. I spent a long time circling around Lunica, killed quite a few magic beasts and bandits, but never encountered anything really formidable. And you guys? You were supposed to be handling the relatively safe merchant activity. Can someone tell me how you ended up provoking something like this? The one who had arrived and saved everyone with such powerful ice magic was none other than Wood himself. Ice magic wasn't particularly rare. Even Amelia was quite proficient with it. However, Amelia could not yet cast such a spell instantaneously on this scale. Puck could, but it had sealed its powers to stay with Amelia and would rarely intervene. Wood had come looking for Anastasia and the others after finding the letter Mimi left for him when he returned to the mansion. As the heir to the Hoshin Trading Company, Wood quickly recalled information about the white whale from his memory. Upon confirming that the creature was one of the three great beasts, and that it had troublesome abilities, Wood grew concerned and followed the map Mimi provided to find the group. What he didn't expect was that the situation was even worse than he imagined. Besides the white whale, the witches' cult's and Archbishop of Sloth had also joined in. He also hadn't anticipated that not only were Anastasia and Cross's forces fighting the white whale, but even Subaru's group had been dragged into the chaos. Do you think we wanted to get involved in all this? We're victims here. If your sister and Cross weren't hunting the white whale, and we hadn't been mistakenly caught up, we would have reached the next city by now. Honestly, amidst everything that was happening, Subaru was probably one of the calmest people present. After all, no matter how dangerous the white whale or the Sin Archbishop was, even if there were 100 of them, Subaru wouldn't care. He had no reason to fear. Even if he died, his return by death ability meant he couldn't really die, time would simply reset. And in the next loop, he'd choose a different route to avoid the white whale entirely. He had no ties to Cross or Anastasia, and they were Amelia's rivals anyway, so Subaru had no reason to risk himself to save them. Have you ever thought that maybe it wasn't them who got you involved, but you who got them into this mess? Wood retorted, watching Subaru claim innocence like a bystander. He had long since realized Subaru's ability to draw trouble was unmatched. First, it was Elsa the Bowel Hunter, then the Sword Saint, and then the Beast User Melee. Even during a supposedly safe trade trip, Subaru had managed to run into the white whale and the witch's cult. Wood had spent the past few days hunting with Rem, fighting countless magic beasts, but none of them were significant. Subaru, on the other hand, had picked the safe route with an elite guard and still ended up in danger. That kind of luck had to be supernatural. And who might you be? An enemy of the Great Witch? Such laziness. What punishment shall I grant you? Ah, my brain trembles. Seeing Wood, Sloth tilted his head at an eerie angle and stared at him with bulging eyes. When he couldn't understand why this unanticipated person had appeared, Sloth's expression turned manic. He first clutched his head as if in pain, then bit his fingers until they bled, with no hint of pain in his face. Who was this madman supposed to be? Wood asked, confused by Sloth's bizarre behavior. At first, he didn't even associate him with the Sin Archbishops of the witches' cult. It wasn't until Julius and the others warned Wood that he sensed imminent danger. Wood instantly leaped away from his spot, even having the presence of mind to kick Subaru away from the threat. Boom. The moment Wood moved, the ground where he had stood cracked open, with a clear handprint depression on the rocky surface. Wood, be careful. This guy is one of the Sin Archbishops, and his ability involves using these unseen hands to attack. Julius and the others got caught off guard because of them, but for some reason, I can see these invisible hands. Let me work with you to take down this lunatic. Subaru, who had been kicked away by Wood, rolled across the ground before standing up and shouting. No need. Just find a safe spot and stay out of my way. If you die, it's a hassle for me, and I don't want to have to go through all this trouble again. It's just some invisible attack. Troublesome, but hardly invincible. Subaru was about to warn Wood not to underestimate Sloth. Julius and the others had been caught because of carelessness, but Subaru's words were cut off as the next moment proved him wrong. Sloth launched his invisible hands towards Wood, but Wood, without Subaru's warning, moved as if he anticipated the attack. He dodged the grasp of the invisible hands effortlessly and, in a few swift moves, was right in front of Sloth. A flash of silver swept through the air, and Sloth's crazed expression turned into one of shock, his pupils expanding to their limits. Wood flicked a few drops of blood from his sword, looking at the still dumbfounded Sloth. It seems your ability isn't just for offense. It's also quite a decent defense. Wood was certain his blade had connected, but the damage inflicted on Sloth was negligible, much less than expected. The only explanation was that Sloth had used those unseen things to shield himself. Can you also see my invisible hands, like that witch's favored boy over there? Are you also loved by the witch? Ignoring the speed and swordsmanship Wood had displayed, Sloth couldn't comprehend how his perfected invisible hands had failed to catch the knight in front of him. It was something he could neither understand nor accept. So, those things attacking me are supposed to be hands? I'm afraid I can't see your so-called invisible hands, and I don't know this witch of yours, nor would I ever accept her so-called affection. If your invisible hands are simply invisible with no detectable aura, then frankly, they aren't much of a threat." Upon hearing Wood's words, the expression on Sloth's face, which had been one of bewilderment, quickly twisted into one of rage. Members of the witch's cult were fanatical believers in the Witch of Envy, Satala, and Sloth was the most devout of them all. Wood's dismissive remarks about the witch's love and the value of the Sin Archbishop's powers were nothing short of blasphemy. With an explosive surge of power, more invisible hands appeared, larger and more potent, reaching out towards Wood like an inescapable net. Subaru, who could see the invisible hands, found himself overwhelmed. Even knowing where they were, there were so many that it seemed impossible to avoid them all. Haven't you figured it out yet? Sometimes, intuition perceives far more than the eye can see. Humans have 5 senses, but for a swordsman who has refined their heart, body, and technique to a certain level, perception goes beyond mere sight. I'm not like Rem and the others of the Ana tribe. I can't smell the so-called witch's scent. But I still have my hearing and touch. The invisible hands are physical, and I can hear the subtle changes in the wind as they move. Combined with the humidity and temperature shifts after my ice magic, those slight disturbances are more than enough for me to sense their presence. Wood dodged the attacks of the invisible hands with agility and continued speaking with an almost casual tone. Even if you can evade my invisible hands, these hands are unique to the Sin Archbishops of the witch's cult. No magic or swordsmanship can easily break or sever them. You might manage to dodge for now, but how long can your body endure? Once you tire, I will tear you apart with my powers. Sloth finally understood that Wood was an anomaly, but as long as he kept his distance, Sloth believed he held the advantage. However, when Wood heard Sloth's words, he simply smirked. I may not be Reinhard, without the Sword Saint's blessing to cut through anything, but there are very few things in this world I cannot sever. I'm afraid your invisible hands aren't among them. As if to prove his point, Wood didn't dodge the invisible hands this time. Instead, he firmly gripped his sword, and the surrounding winds began to gather around the blade. Tear it all apart. Hyaki Yagio style, wind attribute sword, Atachi. The sword traced a silver arc through the air, and a fierce wind, like a weasel wielding a sickle, carved a deep gash into the earth. Chapter 366, Arrogant Wood. The violent wind blade attack swept out, dispersing the surrounding white mist and carving a 100-meter-long trench in the ground. Wood couldn't see if the so-called invisible hands were severed, but he could confirm that all airflow caused by the invisible hands had disappeared. After fending off the attack in front of him with a single strike, Wood swiftly turned and slashed the ground beneath Julius and the others. As a massive gash several meters deep appeared on the ground, Julius and his companions could feel the bindings that had previously restrained their legs vanish. Though they had been bound, Julius and the others had helped Wood bear the brunt of the White Whale's attacks. To be precise, the immobile members of the group had been forced to endure the White Whale's assaults. When the White Whale charged at them directly, Welkin and Thorn were somewhat capable of putting up resistance. However, when the White Whale attacked from a distance using the white mist, Cross and Julius were left to bear the full brunt of the attack. If Julius had used the rainbow sword that he had unleashed during his fight against Wood, he could probably sever the invisible hands. Unfortunately, the charging time for that move was too long, and the White Whale had no intention of giving him such an opportunity. Thus, from the very beginning, Julius and Cross could only defend passively. Once freed from the invisible hands, Julius and the others immediately regained their combat abilities. They considered resuming their attack on the White Whale or assisting Wood against Sloth. However, Wood spoke up. Uncle Welkin, Julius, you two go protect my sister. As for Thorn, take your men and retrieve the lost cargo and runaway dragon carriages. Though Anastasia had a proud and ambitious spirit, her combat ability was sorely lacking, no different from any delicate young lady. While Mimi and her siblings, along with several assassins, were protecting her, Wood was still worried about any unforeseen events. Wait a minute. If you all retreat to the rear, how am I supposed to hold back the White Whale alone? Hearing Wood instruct Welkin and Julius to protect Anastasia and Thorn to retrieve lost goods, Cross was stunned. Wouldn't that leave her alone to face the White Whale? Cross had trained as a knight from a young age and was confident in her abilities. Still, she wasn't arrogant enough to compare herself to the previous Sword Saint. Not to mention, even the previous Sword Saint had fallen before the White Whale. How could Cross possibly expect to defeat it alone? There's no need for you to hold off the White Whale. Whether it's the White Whale or the Sin Archbishop, I can handle them by myself. Your wisdom and leadership are exemplary. Please lead the rest to search for survivors in the fog. Upon hearing Wood's words, Cross was momentarily stunned. When she came to her senses, her first thought was that Wood was being overly arrogant. Cross knew Wood as Anastasia's younger brother and as someone who had sided with Amelia's camp and served as her knight. Her first encounter with Wood was at the royal selection ceremony, where she had formed a positive impression of him based on his words. But after what Wood just said, Cross's impression of him drastically deteriorated. Cross had been raised to embody the virtues of a knight. Now, she saw Wood as a capable knight, but one lacking in humility. No, this wasn't merely a lack of humility. This was outright arrogance. Cross had heard from Felix that Wood had joined the royal guard after defeating the finest knight. And his recent battle with Sloth had further proven his capabilities. Yet despite this, Wood's declaration that he could take on both the Sin Archbishop and the White Whale alone seemed completely reckless to Cross. Julius, are you really going to follow his lead? This is pure madness. Right now, Wilhelm is still in the fog fighting two of the White Whale's clones. What we need to do is combine our strength to defeat the main body of the White Whale, not indulge the whims of Amelia's knight. To Cross, the main threats were the White Whale and Sloth. Defeating either one could turn the tide in their favor. Allowing Wood to act recklessly would mean losing their only opportunity for a turning point. I am Anastasia's knight, so I see no problem in protecting her. Besides, Lady Cross, I believe your concern is that Wood may not be capable of defeating the White Whale and the Sin Archbishop alone. As for that, I can only say that you will soon witness what it truly means to be a monster. Julius, out of politeness, offered an explanation to Cross. As for Welkin, he ignored her entirely and simply turned away. Having raised both Wood and Anastasia, Welkin knew full well how absurdly capable Wood was. Back when Welkin first met the siblings in Karagi, they had been surrounded by local thugs. Although Welkin had initially planned to intervene and rescue them, the then 10-year-old Wood single-handedly took down every one of the thugs. Not only that, but the drunken Welkin, who had gone to help, was mistaken for an enemy and ended up in a scuffle with Wood. As for the result of that fight, Welkin could remember it as if it happened just yesterday. Welkin at that time was in his prime, yet the 10-year-old Wood, who had already defeated dozens of thugs, fought him to a standstill. If Wood hadn't just been in a fight and wasn't preoccupied with protecting Anastasia, Welkin knew he might have lost. Welkin had been one of the strongest beastmen in Karagi, and yet, he had been nearly defeated by a 10-year-old. Who would believe that? After that incident, Welkin decided to follow Anastasia and Wood, and over the years, he witnessed the exceptional talents of both siblings. Anastasia demonstrated a keen eye and deft manipulation, outplaying even renowned merchants in Karagi by her teens. As for Wood, Welkin believed him to be a natural-born warrior, mastering combat skills and magic at an unprecedented rate. Before Reinhard had gained fame, Welkin had believed that Wood was destined to become the world's strongest. Even now, Welkin believed that the Wood he knew might very well match the so-called Sword Saint in strength. Anastasia possessed remarkable business acumen, while Wood had unrivaled combat skills. The siblings even held no prejudice against demi-humans, and they went as far as to rely on them. This was why Welkin had chosen to follow them. In Welkin's eyes, if anyone could change the fate of demi-humans, it would be these two siblings. For that reason, to Welkin, Wood's arrival essentially meant the outcome of this battle was no longer in question. Lady Cross, you might not believe this, but I also think Wood can handle the White Whale and the Sin Archbishop alone. If you're asking why, well, it's because he once fought Reinhard to a draw. Does that reason suffice? Felix's words left Cross visibly stunned, and she confirmed again. Fought Reinhard to a draw? Are you sure? Did Reinhard go all out, or was it just a spar? As a noble from Lunica and someone raised in the capital, Cross was well aware of how absurd Reinhard's power was. Even Wilhelm, the sword demon who taught her swordsmanship, had said that no one in this world could defeat Reinhard. Even if he fought alongside his wife, the former sword saint, they would still stand no chance against Reinhard. With such high praise from the sword demon himself, Reinhard's strength was unquestionable. Yet now Felix claimed that Wood matched him? Reinhard himself confirmed the draw, and he said that even though he had drawn his dragon sword, Reed, he was on the defensive throughout, and would only concede it voluntarily. Felix's words shook Cross to her core. Before she could respond, a pained cry from the White Whale echoed through the fog, along with furious shouts from Sloth. Why haven't you left yet? If you want to stick around for the spoils, that's your business, but I'm not going to waste my efforts looking after you. Wood evaded another strike from the invisible hands and looked at Cross, who had remained instead of searching for survivors. He spoke bluntly. Though they were currently allies, Wood had no connection with Cross, and only a nominal one with Felix as a fellow knight. If they truly got into trouble, he wouldn't necessarily help them. I apologize for my earlier short-sightedness. I will immediately search for the wounded and survivors. I wish you great fortune in this battle. Once Cross realized that Wood was truly capable of handling both the White Whale and Sloth, she apologized without any aristocratic airs and rode off to find the missing people. Watching Cross leave, Wood sighed to himself. Winning the royal selection isn't going to be easy. Every candidate seems far from ordinary. But for now, I suppose dealing with the current threat takes priority. Sloth was now doing everything he could against Wood, no longer showing the composure he had before. Besides using the invisible hands, Sloth also used his mental pollution ability. Since Wood could sever the invisible hands and his physical capabilities were strong enough to close the distance, Sloth resorted to high-level earth magic. Sloth's real name was Juice. Formerly a small earth spirit over 400 years ago and once a teacher to Beatrice. He was once quite handsome, even serving as Amelia's adoptive father, and had been in love with her adoptive mother, Fortuna. Back when Amelia's elf village was attacked by Pandora, the Witch of Vanity, and Regulus Corneas, the Sin Archbishop of Greed, Juice tried to protect everyone by consuming the incomplete witch factor of Sloth. However, when the witch factor went out of control, Pandora used her powers to twist reality, causing Juice to accidentally kill Fortuna. After he regained consciousness, he lost his sanity and became the madman he is now. As for Amelia, she ended up sealed in ice for 100 years, until Puck saved her, erasing her previous memories. All in all, Sloth was a tragic romantic, but also a top-tier earth spirit. But none of that mattered to Wood. Even if he knew, it wouldn't change anything. The only salvation for this man was death. With a simple wave of his arm, Sloth caused the ground to shake, and sharp spikes shot up, aiming for Wood's vital points. Wood leaped into the air to avoid the unexpected earth spikes, but immediately sensed the invisible hands closing in on him again through his observation hockey. While airborne, one's maneuverability is greatly reduced due to the lack of a foothold. Sloth, despite his insanity, wasn't stupid. He possessed a wealth of combat experience. Seeing Wood suspended in midair, Sloth grinned maniacally, confident that Wood would be unable to evade his invisible hands while airborne. Even if Wood could sever the invisible hands, Sloth believed he had only one chance. Afterward, Wood would either fall or be captured, and in both cases, Sloth was sure of his victory. However, what happened next was beyond Sloth's expectations. Wood did indeed slice through the first wave of the invisible hands. But when the second wave came, Wood did not fall or get caught. Instead, he stepped on the air itself, maintaining his position in midair. Chapter 367, One Kick Obliterates the White Whale. Walking on air. Could humans really achieve something like that? Even if such magic existed, Sloth was now fully aware that there wasn't any magical energy flowing through the air. In other words, Wood managed this incredible feat purely through his physical abilities and skill. What? What are you? Sloth shouted angrily, glaring at Wood, who was stepping on the air as if it were solid ground, moving swiftly. Even with his mental instability, Sloth couldn't help but be enraged. If Wood were a birdman or some other demi-human species, Sloth might have understood, but Wood was clearly an ordinary human. How could he possess such outrageous skills? Don't you understand? Even a human body holds infinite potential. With enough training, feats like this aren't completely impossible. Wood's physical strength was more than enough to execute the 6 powers. And the current skill he used, moonwalk, was clearly beyond Sloth's understanding. Grrr. Just as Wood was talking to Sloth, a deep whale song suddenly echoed through the mist around them, and the next second, a massive plume of white mist shot toward him. The white whale's vanishing mist could erase a target's existence, making it far more dangerous than Sloth's invisible hands. Faced with the incoming mist, Wood did not attempt to meet it head-on but instead conjured a green magic circle in front of himself. A fierce wind vortex roared from the magic circle and collided with a white whale's plume of mist. The mist had the properties of water but remained in a gaseous state, and no gas, no matter how dense, could withstand the onslaught of a tornado. The wind vortex, like a spear, pierced straight through the white whale's mist. In the same instant, Wood's figure vanished from his previous position, tracing the direction of the plume to locate the hidden white whale amidst the thick mist. Armament iron body, sky-splitting stone smash. Combining the instant transmission and moonwalk techniques from the 6 powers, Wood accelerated through the dense mist. The white whale, whose sneak attack had failed, had intended to retreat into the mist once more but failed to notice the figure above its massive head. From several hundred meters up, Wood appeared suddenly above the mist. His leg, cloaked in a black metallic sheen, descended with blinding speed. Gravity and his own weight accelerated the kick, creating a shockwave akin to a meteor descending from the sky, complete with wind barriers and a fiery trail. The white whale, a colossal creature over 50 meters long with a massive horn on its head and white fur that could significantly weaken magic and physical attacks, was no match for the force of Wood's kick. The moment Wood's foot connected with the whale's head, a tremendous shockwave swept outwards. With a clear crack, the massive horn on the white whale's head shattered, and its colossal skull visibly caved in. Grrr. A whale's cry, sounding almost like a child's wail, echoed through the mist. Anyone with functioning ears could hear the pain in that cry. Far more intense than any previous calls. Ripple after ripple spread out from beneath the white whale, and the next moment, the gigantic creature, over 50 meters in length, plummeted from the sky, breaking the sound barrier as it fell. Boom. The deafening crash that followed shook the ground, causing those in the area to feel the earth tremble beneath them. The dense mist obscured their vision, making it impossible to see what had happened, but the agonizing whale cry was enough to indicate that the one taking the blow was certainly not Wood. Is that guy even human? Unlike the others, who were still surrounded by the thick mist, Sloth had been fighting Wood up close and was therefore closest to the white whale. Thanks to the witch factor inside him and his own origin as a minor spirit, the mist had little effect on him. Because of this, Sloth had a clear view of everything that had just happened. He had initially believed Wood to be nothing more than a skilled swordsman and magic user. But that single kick shattered all of Sloth's beliefs. Humans being able to move through the air was already ridiculous, but Sloth could grudgingly accept it. However, the sight of a human delivering a kick that not only broke the sound barrier but also sent a 50-meter-long, several hundred-ton whale flying for kilometers across the ground. How could that be humanly possible? Such strength and power. Not even ancient magical beasts were known to possess such capabilities. Wood's kick not only sent the white whale flying, but it also shattered Sloth's confidence. Sloth had been confident that, with his formidable earth magic, the invisible hands ability, and the white whale's occasional sneak attacks, he could take down Wood. But the white whale, currently lying in a crater with its massive body unconscious from a single kick, proved to Sloth that this young knight was nothing short of a monster. Sloth quietly committed Natsuki Subaru's face to memory. Retreat had already started to form in his mind. He may have been mentally unstable, but he wasn't an idiot. It was clear to anyone with a discerning eye that Wood was in a league of his own. One of the three great beasts, the white whale, had been kicked away like a child. Staying longer would only mean death. Just as Sloth and his remaining underlings were about to retreat under cover of the lingering mist, a massive green magic circle rapidly expanded from beneath Wood's feet. As Wood's immense magical power surged, the magic circle grew exponentially, quickly encompassing tens of kilometers, enveloping the entire plain. Though the dense mist blocked their vision, everyone in the area could see the glow of the massive magic circle etched into the ground. This mist is really getting on my nerves. Julius and Welkin are protecting my sister, so they should be fine. As for everyone else, my apologies. I'll try to minimize the magic's destructive power. Emperor-level wind magic, raging turbulence. The enormous magic circle covering the entire plain burst into a brilliant green glow. As those standing on the magic circle felt the flow of mana beneath their feet, their expressions turned to shock. Just as they started to make some emergency preparations, the first whiff of wind blew out from the magic circle. In mere seconds, a massive tornado rose from the center of the plain, reaching all the way to the clouds above. The wind, with strength equivalent to a Category 12 typhoon, not only swept up countless rocks from the plain but also uprooted many plants. If deep-rooted plants were blown away, there was no question about what would happen to the mist or the people in that area. But since Wood's intention was simply to disperse the mist covering the plain, he didn't unleash the full destructive power of Emperor-level wind magic. Instead, he used its wide coverage to his advantage. In less than a minute, the thick mist had completely dissipated. The duration of the windstorm was short, and many managed to hold on to rocks and plants, avoiding being blown away. Only a few unfortunate ones, who couldn't find anything to grab, were swept into the air, now falling back to the ground. Most who fell were warriors, assassins, or beastmen. Their trained bodies weren't enough to kill them on impact, but broken bones were unavoidable. Wood's magical power is still absurdly strong, but he's just as reckless as ever. No wonder Sister turned out the way she did. Tiv, one of the cat tribe triplets, sighed, undoing her defensive magic and surveying the surrounding chaos. Alongside Welkin, who had protected Anastasia, Julius dispelled the protective barrier made of spirits, and upon hearing Tiv's words, his expression stiffened. Not only Julius but also Cross, positioned elsewhere, felt a similar shock as she dispelled her own magical defense. The once verdant plain had been gouged out by the storm, and her expression was one of disbelief. As the heir of a duke, Cross had seen powerful magic before. Court magicians were not uncommon to her. Even Lunika's strongest magician, Roswale, who possessed the blessing of magic and could wield 6 attributes, held titles like Red, Green, and Yellow. Until today, Cross had always believed Roswale to be the strongest in Lunika regarding magic and mana. However, today's events shook that belief. The massive magic that had encompassed tens of kilometers. Cross had enough understanding of magic to recognize that Wood hadn't even fully unleashed its power before cutting it off himself. Felix, in your understanding, how much mana would be required to release a spell of that magnitude? Limited in her own understanding of magic, Cross looked to Felix for an answer. Felix, although not specialized in combat, was still the youngest to receive the blue title as a highly talented magician. I don't know. That kind of mana exceeds what humans are supposed to possess. If I had to quantify it, I'd say it would take at least 2 full magic core to pull off something like that. Hearing Felix's answer, Cross fell silent, murmuring. So it would take about 200 magicians to cast that spell. A full magical battalion consisted of around 100 mages, meaning that would spell had the power of 2 such battalions. Lady Cross, don't forget the other factors. He cancelled the spell before it even reached its full power. And to control that much mana with such precision. It means that what we saw wasn't even his limit. As a knowledgeable magician, Felix could see more than the others. Because of this, his gaze on Wood, standing at the center of it all, was filled with amazement. In the past, Felix had doubted the rumor of Wood drawing with Reinhard, but after what he had witnessed,